Chapter 311. Sometime later in the afternoon, Gustav was headed for Gammy Dojo by himself. He happened to meet some people waiting for him by the entrance. Just like the ones who visited him the previous night, these ones also handed him invitation cubes. Gustav was quite surprised when he received invitation cubes from the entourage of 6 different family heads. "Well, I kinda saw this coming," Gustav said internally as he stored them in his storage cube before heading up. "Even Matilda's family is among. I wonder why they didn't visit my house like the other one," Gustav said internally as he arrived up. He went on ahead with his personal training before heading back home to his appointment with those 6 new mixed bloods he was planning to employ. Even though he had managed to win over the 3 that came to cause trouble in the storage room today, he still wanted more staff. He had decided he would let any new recruit be trained by the current staff in his absence. The 3 from Eagle Wings were already experienced, so having won them over, Gustav was feeling elated. The 6 he interviewed later were so shocked upon finding out that the agency owner was the number 1 participant of the MBO. All in all, everything went well, and Gustav returned back home in the evening after he was done. He was planning a joint raid with Braun and Dirk next week before he left for the MBO camp. Since he was looking forward to breaking through to the serial rank before leaving for the MBO camp, Gustav happened to meet Angie in front of his apartment door as he arrived home. He was a bit taken aback since she hadn't done this in a long time, so he felt it must be something important. "Angie, is there a problem?" Gustav asked. Angie seemed to be fidgeting as she twirled her hair with a shy look. "No, there's no problem at all," Angie replied with a wry smile. "Oh, then what is it?" Gustav asked. "I wanted to remind you of something." She smiled and avoided eye contact with Gustav as she turned her face to the other side. "I'm all ears," Gustav responded. Our date is still holding next week Thursday, right?" she asked. Gustav laughed lightly as he heard that. "Of course, I didn't forget," Gustav replied. "Oh, all right. I just wanted to remind you. It'll be going now." Angie's neck was already reddened at this point as she waved Gustav goodbye and went back to her apartment. Gustav shook his head with a light smile on his face as he headed in. He sat on his sofa as he began to bring out the cubes in his storage device. These weren't just invitation cubes from big families alone, but also from some organizations. Gustav had been approached repeatedly to become the endorser for products of different companies, but he had ignored all of them so far. He understood that he didn't like being in the limelight since it was making living uncomfortable for him. The recent event with his parents further boosted his popularity, and people discussed him everywhere he went now. The moment he was noticed in a public place, he became the topic of discussion, and it was becoming really uncomfortable for him. So he turned down these endorsement deals. Gustav began to activate the cubes one after the other. Just as he expected, these big families were having one celebration or the other. The celebrations were mostly under the guise of celebrating the youngster in their household that managed to make it into the MBO. Gustav was being invited to attend, so their offspring would be able to form connections with the most powerful MBO participant. "Greetings from the Dom family. We would like for you to attend." "Greetings from the Oyang family. We are inviting you to our special greetings from the Siena family, young Gustav." Every footage ended with them promising Gustav rewards for attending their celebration. "Clowns," Gustav said internally after he finished watching another one. Obviously, he couldn't attend all of them. He would have to choose some over others since he still had important things to do than spending all his time showing up at parties. Some of them happened to even be on the same day. He automatically canceled those that were holding next week Thursday due to his date with Angie. Gustav finally activated the last one, which happened to be from Matilda's household. "The Koyan family is inviting you for my celebration, Gustav. Please make sure you show up." Instead of influential family members like the rest, Matilda was the one in this footage. It was as if the family knew that seeing Maltida in the footage as the one doing the invitation would actually affect Gustav's decision to attend. Fortunately, it happened to be holding the day before his date with Angie, so he had no problem with attending. The day came to an end, and Gustav arrived back in his home. By midnight, since he went out to hunt some mixed breeds and farm EXP, Gustav arrived in his room and once again pulled off his tattered clothes that got incinerated by the mixed breeds he battled today. You sure love to destroy clothes, don't you? He suddenly heard the voice of the system in his head. Well, it's not like there's anything I can do about the entire vicinity turning into a domain of magma. There's no way any cloth would be able to survive that, Gustav responded while walking towards the shower after pulling everything off. Why don't you try creating clothes that are immune to temperature change and wouldn't easily get destroyed in battles? The system proposed. I already thought of that, but I won't begin the process till after next week, Gustav responded. Oh, you did? Looks like you're a little less dumb than I thought. The system replied. Gustav ignored the system and kept showering, but then he thought of something. Hey, don't tell me you can't see my... Gustav covered his privates as he thought of this. He subconsciously wanted to hide his P***NIS since the system sounded and looked like a girl. Idiot, I live inside you. So, of course, I've seen everything. Not like there's much to see anyways. The girlish voice of the system laughed lightly as it voiced out. Gustav. Gustav felt like cursing the system again at the moment as he showered in silence. Hey, have you figured out how to use your YRKI? The system asked. No, I haven't. Been trying, but I can seem to figure it out, Gustav replied. How about I give you a clue? Chapter 3:12. No, I haven't. Been trying, but I can't seem to figure it out, Gustav replied. How about I give you a clue? The system proposed. Gustav was surprised at the system's sudden proposal to render assistance. Why are you nice all of a sudden? Is there a catch? Gustav questioned with a tone of suspicion. He didn't think the system would just assist him because he had been hard working in trying to figure out how to use Yarki. Why should there be a catch? Idiot, the stronger you are, the better it is for the both of us. Why would I want your growth to be restricted when it is also to my own benefit? The system chided. Oh, fair enough then. But instead of giving me a clue, why not just tell me the entire process? Gustav asked shamelessly with a smile. Stupid. Did you forget about the time I mentioned that you have to figure it out yourself? If I tell you the entire process, you'll remain a sub-parallel being forever. You won't be able to go beyond that class, the system voiced out. Gustav had a look of understanding after hearing that. All right then, he muttered. Cosmic superiority is a universal power bestowed upon the privileged. As you know, there are other beings in the universe that have achieved it. I've seen that you've been trying to channel the power of Yarki differently because of this. It's a universal level of power that doesn't only center around mixed bloods. This means other beings without bloodlines can use this power. So, the system voiced out lengthily and suddenly stopped. Gustav exclaimed with a look of confusion. That's it. Figure out the rest yourself, the system stated and kept quiet afterward. Gustav's forehead creased up as he stared at nothing while standing underneath the shower. He knew the system had bailed out of telling him more, and it wouldn't reply him even if he questioned it again, so he didn't bother trying to. Gustav's facial expression showed that he was trying to solve a puzzle. Wait, the system mentioned seeing me trying to channel cosmic superiority differently from how I channel my bloodlines, which means... Gustav's face suddenly showed an expression of realization. I shouldn't be trying to channel the power differently. The other beings in the universe who also use the power of Yarki make use of the power in a similar way to how they use their own original power. Since we're all different beings and we achieved cosmic superiority in different ways, Gustav muttered with a look of understanding as he stepped out of the shower and wiped himself up. After doing that, he changed into his pajamas and went to his room. Still, I need to find the location of the power within me before I can make use of it, so I can say I have successfully gained knowledge about the first step, Gustav said, as he sat down on his bed in a cross-legged position. It was truly, as the system said. Gustav had been trying several methods to activate cosmic superiority, but none of the methods tried was similar to bloodline channeling. So, this time Gustav had decided to try and look for the power within him by channeling all bloodlines at the same time. Gustav had never tried this because so many things could go wrong with trying to channel several bloodlines at the same time. He might end up exploding into a bloody mess or lose control and turn into a mixed breed that would have the combination of all his abilities. Even if he successfully managed to channel every bloodline at the same time, the speed of channeling would be extremely slow. However, Gustav had no choice but to try it this time, since it was necessary. Gustav slowly concentrated his senses inwards and began to spread them around the parts where his bloodlines were located. One after the other, he connected to each and every one of them. However, unlike before, where he would have firm control of them, which would enable him to channel that particular bloodline properly, this time, it felt like he only had a very vague hold over them. Gustav raised his concentration to the peak as he began to channel every one of his 30-plus bloodlines at the same time. Every single bloodline stored within Gustav began to tremble and bubble slowly as Gustav channeled them. Gustav smiled as he successfully managed to begin channeling the bloodlines together. However, it seemed to be mentally and physically tasking for him. I need to use their energy to find out where the power is hidden, Gustav said internally as his skin started changing color due to the multiple channeling. Shroom. In just a few seconds, Gustav's skin had transformed from warm cream color to red. Beads of sweat began to roll down his face as he closed his eyes. Occasionally, part of his body would twist out of shape before returning back to normal. Gustav searched all around with his senses buried deep. His chin suddenly started getting longer as a black, pointy horn grew out of it for a few seconds before returning back to normal. I can't keep this up. I need to find it before things get too overwhelming, Gustav said internally as he continued channeling. Due to channeling every bloodline at the same time, he was feeling immense strength and energy running through his body, but it would get very dangerous if he kept this up. Within his body, every bloodline channel point was separated. Still, the bloodlines were bubbling intensely at this moment, and some of them started moving out of their concentrated area. They were getting close to mixing with other bloodlines that were also being channeled. Gustav had to make sure these bloodlines being channeled didn't meet up with one another, or it would cause severe catastrophes within his body. Gustav's face suddenly morphed into one filled with red scales before going back to normal. Chapter 3:13. Other times a third arm would grow out of his back, and his hair would transform into baby snakes before returning back to normal. Occurrences like this kept on happening for the next 2 hours, along with the temperature change of the room, before Gustav finally smiled. Beads of sweat rolled down the sides of his face as he smiled. Found it, he said internally as his senses noticed a small pinkish liquid flame hiding deep within him. Beads of sweat rolled down the sides of his face as the smile appeared. The moment Gustav noticed this small liquid pinkish flame, he could already sense that this was the Yarki within him. He didn't need to be informed. He already sensed the connection to it, which grew even stronger after his senses noticed it. The pinkish flame instantly increased in size and became twice its initial size. At this moment, Gustav stopped channeling the bloodlines and instead tried channeling the pinkish flame within him. A pink-like aura suddenly illuminated the entire room from his being. Shurokukum. The aura that extended from his body didn't stop after filing up the entire apartment. Instead, it kept spreading outwards. Shururium. It spread outside of the building, then to the houses in the vicinity and the entire neighborhood area that covered over 30 miles. It took Gustav by surprise because at this moment, He was like a living light bulb. The entire neighborhood was suddenly thrown into disarray by this unknown power, even though it was late in the night. Some of them woke up but couldn't understand where the source of light was coming from. Angie, who was sleeping at the moment in her parents' apartment, could not help but shiver subconsciously as she felt the strange power in the air. There were not a lot of mixed breeds in this neighborhood, but at the moment, the few of them felt chills within them even in their sleep. Gustav, who was the source of this disturbance, had no idea about the influence he was causing by unleashing this power. He even wondered if he was using it the right way. So, this is Yarki. I don't feel any different, though, Gustav said as he stood to his feet. There must be other ways it can be applied. Gustav muttered with a look of contemplation as he raised his hand. The Guara mentioned that I could use it to make species in a particular range of power submit to me. Gustav recalled. I will need to try this out later, Gustav said as he slowly deactivated Yarki. For some reason, he didn't get any system notification about it, so he guessed cosmic superiority wasn't controlled by the system, which made him wonder how the system was able to make him achieve it in the first place. I'll advise you to only use that in life-threatening situations. The system suddenly spoke. Want you congratulate me first? Gustav asked while raising one eyebrow. You're the first subparallel being in the universe to gain the power of Yarki without being able to activate it. Do you still think you deserve congratulations? The system asked with a chiding tone. Gustav, what was I expecting? Why do you say I should only use it in life-threatening situations, though? Gustav asked. Although it doesn't run on energy from you or me, it can still run out of power if you overuse it. Your YRKI is still in its baby phase, so I can tell it doesn't have a lot of power. If you use it too much, you will run out of energy and have to wait for it to recharge for an entire day or more, so mind how you make use of it. The system explained. Gustav nodded in understanding as he heard this. He was glad Yarki didn't use his energy, but now he had to be careful not to use it up entirely, which meant that even when training, he had to train moderately. At this time, it was already past 3 in the morning, which meant Gustav would not be able to go to sleep since he had to do his daily routine. Gustav went back into the shower to take his bath and change his cloth before heading out once again. Just like that, another 2 days went by in a flash, and it was the weekend. Gustav had finalized the employment of the 3 who came looking for trouble the other day. The green-bearded man was known as Heike, the purple-headed man was known as Vibrant, and the red-haired lady was known as Fialorna. Gustav explained to them how he wanted their operations to be carried out with Braun and Dirk. The 3 newbies he employed were to be trained by these 5 since their job was to hunt, while the other 3 he employed were to handle the delivery process of mixed breeds' corpses. One was the new secretary, who would be stationed in the storage room at all times. Only a manager was missing now, and Gustav already had someone in mind for that. Gustav had already decided that he would be testing out the power of Yarki today within the border. He finished training with Miss Amy in the afternoon and immediately headed for the border. Gustav didn't need to stress like before to open a side of the border. His ability had been applied to a rectangular-shaped technological device that instantly opened a hole within the border for easy access. Braun and Dirk were the only ones Gustav entrusted with this device, since people were not permitted entry into the border except him. Gustav arrived inside in a few seconds and was already journeying through the forest of trees. He was headed back towards the area where he found that massive serpentine mixed breed that nearly consumed him, if not for the red shadow. Or should I just try it out with the weaker ones first? Gustav immediately discarded that thought. I need to know where the limits lie first, Gustav said internally as he leaped upwards and landed on the last tree situated in front of the plain area without any vegetation. Chapter 3:14. I need to know where the limits lie first, Gustav said internally as he leaped upwards and landed on the last tree situated in front of the plain area without any vegetation. He observed this familiar area once again. Stones piled up together in different spots around this area could be seen. I'm way faster than I was a month ago, so I should barely be able to escape it. If this doesn't work, Gustav thought as he squatted on a tree branch that was as thick as an arm. He raised his hand and grabbed a branch above before using it to swing himself upwards. Swan. Gustav spun in midair repeatedly as his body ascended to a branch close to the top of the same tree. He repeated the same action again and found himself at the top of the tree, where he could see the outline of the environment in front from a height of 120 meters. Gustav was thinking about the best possible way to draw the attention of the serpentine mixed breed without having to walk on top of its body. Gustav had learned his lesson the last time. Seeing as the piled-up stones were still in many different spots around there, he knew the serpentine mixed breed was very much alive underneath the ground. After all, the red shadow didn't fight the creature. He only saved Gustav from it. You do know that there's a high possibility that this won't work, especially when the difference in strength is too significant. The system warned Gustav before he ventured into the domain of danger. Gustav paused his thoughts and decided to ask something. What level is that serpentine mixed breed? Level 36. The system answered bluntly. Gustav's eyes widened slightly as he heard that. 36, he muttered with a disbelieving expression. He had expected it to be around level 20. So hearing 36 gave him a surprise because comparing that to the power level of a mixed blood was somewhere around Gilbert or Marshall rank. Although that was nothing compared to the Red Shadow or Miss Amy's strength, Gustav would find himself at the door of death if he tried battling a creature on this level. He knew all these since he had experienced it firsthand. Now, he understood why he was unable to go against the serpentine mixed breed the last time, and even with the creature's massive size, he was unable to outrun it. Gustav was starting to doubt he could outrun it now because he felt the creature might not have displayed its full speed. He decided to revise his plan and make a new one just in case things went south when he uses Yarki against the creature. The creature practically lives underground, so the hole won't work. Cognitive concealment could work, but then I need to get out of its range of detection the moment things go south, Gustav said internally as he prepared to distance himself immediately. He triggered the appearance of the creature. Gustav's head transformed into that of the Savrinia serpent mixed breed, turning black with scales all over and black long ram horns along with purplish eyes. Gustav opened his mouth as a purplish beam started gathering in front of his wide-open mouth. The beam was aimed towards one of the piled-up stones hundreds of feet towards the northeast. At the same time, Gustav also activated gravitational energy container, and some of those orbs filled with energy floated around him. They were about 60 in number, and they crowded a radius of 100 feet around Gustav, who was standing at the top of one of the tallest trees in the area. It was like glowing light bulbs, red and blue, were floating around him. The pressure building around him, due to the immense energy he was building, caused the trees in the vicinity to sway. Winds blew across the place. The orbs surrounding Gustav suddenly disappeared as he shot out the purplish beam that had finished building up. Trump! Bang! It slammed into the pile of stones it was aimed at. However, only a little bit of it was blasted apart. The pile of stones that were about 3 feet tall was now about 2 feet due to the blast. Gustav's attack carried a lot of power, but this was the only effect it could cause. However, cracks could be seen around the pile of stones, along with a small crater due to the attack. Gustav had already turned around and leaped forward the moment the attack connected. Gustav landed on another tree hundreds of feet behind, but he still kept leaping with incredible speed. Cracks started appearing all over the partially plain ground in front. The cracks spread across 3 miles as the ground started elevating. Bang! A loud hissing sound, similar to an engine's, reverberated across the place as a massive creature shot out of the ground. Its skin was gray in color with weird but massive-looking scales, along with the pile of stones protruding out of different spots on its body. Its mouth was in between, and its two massive eyeballs were adjacent to each other. It was so large that the combination of the 10 tallest trees in the vicinity wouldn't be comparable to its size. Its body raised up as it stood on its tail and stared at the forest area with its eyes. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it couldn't see anyone in the forest area. Gustav had already distanced himself more than 7,000 feet away from the creature, and at the moment, he hid within a tree with lots of branches. He activated cognitive concealment, which hid his presence. However, the serpentine mixed breed could still sense the direction from which the attack came. SSHHH, GRHH, GRHH. The creature started moving towards Gustav's direction blindly, causing trees to be uprooted in the process as its body cleared a path forward for it. Green fumes oozed out of the pile of stone-like things on its body as it moved. It already covered the area where the creature came out of the ground. These fumes were the same that caused Gustav to be paralyzed before, so he became quite wary as he noticed it. Chapter 3:15. The place where it nearly ate Gustav up the last time was still void of trees and vegetation due to its massive body clearing trees up like they were little sticks. Gustav stayed in his current position as he sent his senses into himself to channel the power of Yarki. The serpentine mixed breed was still moving forward blindly, trashing the trees around, when a pinkish light glow suddenly spread out from a few meters ahead. Shwoosh! The pinkish glow spread out and covered the entire vicinity of this small forest, causing the serpentine creature to pause its movement. The creature started feeling uncomfortable as its body basked in this purplish glow that coated the entire vicinity. At this point, Gustav was very visible due to the massive energy radiating from its being. The creature recognized Gustav, but unlike the last time, it could sense danger coming from him. It stared at Gustav in confusion for a few seconds. Gustav, knowing that he was visible, stood up and leaped to the top of the tree with outstretched hands. His eyes were completely glowing pink at the moment, as the aura oozing out of his being was still as strong as ever. The serpentine mixed breed face cranked up as it stared at Gustav with an expression of discomfort due to seeing the majestic look around him. Sure, having had enough, its massive head suddenly descended downwards towards Gustav's direction. Submit! Gustav voiced out with his outstretched hand pointed in the creature's direction. The creature suddenly felt a kind of inexplicable force running through its entire body. Bam! Its body refused to listen to its command and suddenly slammed to the ground in front of Gustav. Its head was as big as the tree Gustav was standing on, so Gustav could see the eyes of the creature right in front of it. It was as if the creature was bowing down to him. It worked, Gustav said internally with a look of elation as he stared at the creature. The creature had unwillingness in its eyes as it struggled to fight over the strange force. However, a certain kind of fear was creeping into its mind as it stared at Gustav's glowing eyes. Gustav slowly moved forward and stepped onto the head of the creature. He was like a small dot on its massive head, but Gustav liked the feeling. Arise! Gustav voiced out. Surum! The serpentine creature rose up with Gustav on top of it. They ascended over 3,000 feet in the air due to its massive size, and Gustav stared at the forest in front. Gustav smiled as he willed for the serpentine creature to move forward, and it did. So, this is what getting others to submit to you feels like. Gustav muttered as the creature moved forward with speed, causing winds to blow his hair backward. Hey, idiot, aren't you noticing something? The system suddenly voiced out, bringing Gustav out of his merry thoughts. What is it? Gustav asked. Look around you, she voiced out. Ha! Gustav did as he was told and looked around. At first, he didn't notice anything, but in the next second, his eyes widened. The range his Yarki covered was shrinking rapidly. It covered the entire forest area around them before, but now it was only covering about 1/3 of the forest area and still shrinking. What's happening? Gustav was confused as he quickly jumped off the body of the snake and landed on a tree in front. He quickly commanded the creature to distance himself from him, willing it to move in the opposite direction. Gustav started running at the fast speed he could move at as the Yarki shrank rapidly. Shum! In a few seconds that it retracted back into him, the vicinity returned back to normal. He had distanced himself quite a bit from the serpentine creature when it regained control of its body due to the retracted Yarki. The creature who recalled its action a few moments ago was suddenly filled with repression and anguish, which could be seen on its face. It was about to turn around to deal with the lowly creature that caused it to perform such degrading acts when a massive explosion suddenly rocked its tail region. Boom! The explosion was loud and powerful, covering a huge part of its tail, and even causing 3 trees in the vicinity to be blasted apart. However, only a small injury could be seen on its tail. Regardless, this still managed to delay the creature's pursuit. It made some hissing sounds that proved it was angered as its eyes squirmed while it stared at its tail. Thinking someone else attacked it, it turned around to check that direction for the assaulter, but it couldn't find anyone there. After a few more seconds of surveying the area, it turned back around to check for Gustav. However, Gustav was long gone by that time. He had used that time to escape from the small forest area and was currently leaping over a small stream that was on the path to leaving the border. About 5 minutes later, Gustav had already arrived outside the border. Phew! He breathed out in relief as he moved towards the nearest tree and stood under its shade. That was close, Gustav muttered as he sat before the trunk of the tree and leaned his back against it. He had made use of the 60 orbs of energy he conjured before and hit them with gravitational energy. He made them explode at the tail of the creature, so it would think it was being attacked from behind. Gustav sourced for the Yarki within him and found out that it was out of energy. It depleted way too fast. Gustav said internally with a look of disappointment, "Hey, system, you didn't tell me it would only last for 52 seconds. Gustav had calculated the amount of time he spent using Yarki. No, it wasn't supposed to deplete this fast," the system said with a tone of surprise also. "Even though your YRKI is still in its baby phase and weak, it wouldn't have worked against the creature at all. It was able to subdue the creature completely until it ran out of energy." The system added as Gustav heard that. His expression turned into a contemplative one. "Maybe." Gustav's face lit up with a look of realization. "I have 2 theories." Chapter 3:16. Maybe. Gustav's face lit up with a look of realization. "I have 2 theories." The system waited for Gustav to speak. "First, my Yarki is just too weak, so it could only do that much." Gustav voiced out the obvious part first. "Second, my Yarki is very potent, but against higher-level creatures and beings, it would deplete very fast and only have dominance over them for only a short duration," Gustav explained with a contemplative expression. Now that you mention it, these 2 theories do make sense." The system agreed with Gustav's thinking for the first time. "But then I still need to keep making use of it to confirm my speculations," Gustav added as he turned around to stare at the border behind. Gustav decided to head home for now, since energy inside the Yarki had run out. It was the weekend, so by the time Gustav arrived home, it was already evening. He did his usual research and read some books that had information on intergalactic travels. Truly a lot of things are hidden from the general public. Gustav noticed this as he read through some articles. It turned out that lots of Earthlings had migrated to other planets through intergalactic travels. From the research he had been making, he found out that apart from the MBO, other private organizations also dealt with intergalactic travels. If a person wanted to travel out of the planet, it was easy through connections and enough money There were also beings from other planets living on Earth, but the issue was, in some cities, only Earthlings were allowed to reside within. Aliens weren't given access into these cities, and Plankton City happened to be among these cities. Looks like you'll need to ask Miss Amy on her view of the existence of Humbad. I need to gather as much information as I can, Gustav decided before going to bed. The party at Mr. Gone would be held on Monday, so Gustav was looking forward to training his Yarki on Saturday, which was the next day. He decided to go to bed for now, hoping that it would recharge during his sleep. The next morning when Gustav woke up, the first thing he checked out was his Yarki. Gustav reached into his senses and noticed that the pinkish, fiery flame within him was still darkened. Gustav was a little disappointed, but he understood that the system did mention to him that it usually took a lot of time to recharge. He decided to go on with his daily routines. It wasn't till around 2 in the afternoon before he was done. He had a little free time, so he decided to come out of his apartment and move around the neighborhood a little. He happened to bump into Phil on his way down the stairs. Phil was returning from somewhere looking tattered and dirty. Gustav had bumped into Phil many times, but this was the first time he saw Phil in this state. Phil would always greet him with a merry face filled with excitement, but this time his head was hung low as he passed by Gustav's side. This action surprised Gustav as he paused and turned around. "Phil," Gustav called out to the little boy, who was similar in age to his immediate little brother. Phil heard his name and turned around. That was when Gustav noticed the black and swollen side of his face. "Big brother Gustav," he muttered without any energy in his voice. "What happened?" Gustav asked with a suspicious look. "Don't worry about it, big brother Gustav." Phil forced a smile as he spoke. His left side looked hideous with a forced smile due to his bloated cheek. This image instantly reminded Gustav of the times he used to get beaten up. Gustav turned around and walked forward before placing his hand on Phil's shoulder. "Tell me the truth," Gustav said with a low tone. Phil's smile instantly transformed into a frown as his lips quivered. Phil decided to come clean and explained to Gustav how he got into a fight with a group because of a football playground 3 neighborhoods away. It turned out that he and his group of friends were chased out of the playground by a group of bigger boys, even though they got there first. "So, why didn't you fight back?" Gustav asked Phil. "They were all normal humans. I didn't want to hurt them," he muttered. Gustav felt like hitting his head on a wall as he heard this. "Are they still there?" Gustav asked. "They should still be," Phil responded. "Let's go," Gustav said as he grabbed Phil by the hand and started pulling him downwards. "Wait, big brother Gustav." Phil tried calling out to Gustav, but he didn't even answer to him. Swasush! Gustav lifted him and dashed across the neighborhood. "Which way?" Gustav asked as he paused after they got to an intersection. "Left," Phil answered. Gustav turned to the side and sped off into the distance, passing by the side of several houses. After turning left and right once more, they arrived in a part of the edge of the city where a plain field could be seen in the midst of an area filled with grasses. This plain field had 2 football posts on the left and right end of the plain field. Some young teenage boys could be seen playing a football match against each other. They didn't instantly notice Gustav and Phil since they were focused on their match, but one of them stopped playing and turned to stare at Phil when they did. "Yo, this kid came back for more," he voiced out as he started moving forward. The others behind laughed as they heard that and stood to watch the show that was about to unfold. "Is that the one who beat you up?" Gustav asked as he stared at the yellow-skinned boy approaching. "Yes, big brother Gustav," Phil answered as he stared at the boy with a look of anguish. The boy looked to be around 14 years of age, while Phil was only around 12 years of age. Chapter 3:17. Good, now. Before Gustav could finish a statement, the boy in front interrupted. "What is this? You brought your uncle to come fight for you?" he asked with a taunting look as he reached into the back of his pants and brought out a pocket knife. "It'll rough him up too," he voiced out with a smile as he walked closer. "This kid has guts." Taking a pocket knife wherever he goes, Gustav said internally. Phil was a little surprised that the kids didn't recognize Gustav, so he turned to stare at Gustav as he pointed. "Don't you guys know?" Before he could complete his statement, he noticed Gustav's face was different from what he remembered. Gustav had now grown a beard and a mustache. Where did he get that costume, and how was he able to put it on so fast? Phil wondered. Gustav's facial looks were still similar to his original, but the beards had given him a completely different look. Phil had no idea that Gustav made his face look older with shape-shifting. He thought it was a costume to hide his original looks, and he totally understood that Gustav would want to hide his looks due to his recent popularity. "That knife looks cute and all, but you better put that away before you hurt yourself," Gustav stated while rolling his eyes. "Shut up, Grandpa. Don't pretend like you're not scared," the boy voiced out as he moved closer. Gustav chuckled as he heard that, but he wasn't bothered since this was just a kid speaking. Even if he was to get stabbed with a laser pocket knife, it wouldn't penetrate his body, not to talk of an ordinary pocket knife. "Phil, you go out there and return the beating he gave you," Gustav said to Phil. "No, I can't. My mom and sister said never to touch humans because they're fragile or hurt anyone for that matter." Phil rejected the proposal. "Sai, what are they teaching this kid?" Gustav shook his head as he thought. "Did they also mention that you should become a punching bag and receive the beatings of anyone who feels like laying their hand on you?" Gustav asked with a look of disappointment. "No, but..." Before Phil could finish his statement, Gustav interrupted. "There are no buts. In this situation, it's beat or be beaten. Do you want to always be on the receiving end?" Gustav asked, "Do you enjoy being inflicted with pain? Do you hate yourself so much as to tolerate someone inferior laying their hands on you when you can fight back? Mind you, never show sympathy to those who wish to harm you except you're a masochist. So, tell me, Phil, are you a masochist?" Gustav asked in quick succession. At this point, Phil was speechless as he heard Gustav's questions. "Are you lovebirds done jabbering and yammering?" "My ears are bleeding," the kid in front voiced out as he ran forward with the pocket knife. "Phil," Gustav voiced out as he walked forward to meet with the kid in front. The kid's pocket knife was still pointed forward, but the kid seemed to have no intention of actually stabbing someone, so he was shocked when Gustav suddenly dashed forward to meet him. Pucci, due to the fast speed, the knife stabbed forward uncontrollably towards Gustav's gut. "Arg." Gustav moaned in pain as he stood in front of Phil. Phil's eyes widened as he screamed out, "Big brother Gustav." His eyes turned silver as white furs grew out of his limbs, and he transformed into a beastly-looking creature with massive paws and feet. Phil dashed forward and leapt upwards with his legs outstretched. Bam! His leg slammed into the face of the kid, sending the boy flying several feet backwards. Phil looked triggered as he dashed forward again after the kid slammed into the ground in front and started raining kicks and punches on his face. In a matter of seconds, the kid's face was already swollen and full of bruises. Just as Phil was about to stomp on the kid's face again, Gustav dashed forward and grabbed hold of him. "That's enough." Gustav held him up, easily preventing him from continuing the beating. The kids behind had wide open mouths after witnessing the scene before them. They never knew Phil was a mixed blood. They thought he was just a normal Slarkov since he had horns and never actually fought anyone or reveal his abilities. Now that they had witnessed this, they swore in their hearts never to mess with him again. "Big brother Gustav, you are okay?" Phil voiced out. "H&M, I am fine." Gustav nodded as he dropped Phil and showed him the pocket knife that was initially in the hand of the kid. The blade of the pocket knife had twisted towards its handle. "I was not affected," Gustav added, "but someone else would be if they were in my shoes, and you could prevent that if you had dealt with him when he messed with you." Phil had a contemplative look on his face as he heard that. Don't wait to act when you come in contact with people like this. Always put them in their place, Gustav said as he started walking forward. Phil stared at the boy who was lying by the side with a swollen face just like his. After a few seconds of staring, he ran forward to meet up with Gustav. Always control yourself, though, and don't overdo it. Unless the offense deserves a punishment like that, Gustav said with a lecturing tone as they walked away, leaving the kids behind with awe-stricken looks. Hours later, Gustav went back home after hunting some mixed breeds and farming EXP. I am only a few more XPs away from reaching the next level. I wonder if there will be any different when I achieve level 20, Gustav said internally as he went to shower. After showering, he approached his bed to sleep. Tomorrow is the birthday party of Mr. Gon. Let's see what he has to offer, Gustav thought before going to bed. The next morning he awoke once again and checked on his Yarki. Why is it still lacking energy? Gustav voiced out with a look of dissatisfaction as he noticed his Yarki was still dark and void of energy. Hey, system. How long till it recharges? Gustav decided to ask the system, since he couldn't understand why it had not even received an ounce of energy even after 2 days. Beings in the universe who have achieved cosmic superiority don't ever let their Yarki completely run out of energy, because it's always hard to get it charged again, the system stated. So, what do I do? Gustav asked. Chapter 3:18. Beings in the universe who have achieved cosmic superiority don't ever let their Yarki completely run out of energy, because it's always hard to get it charged again, the system stated. So, what do I do? Gustav asked. The thing is, your YRKI isn't trying to recharge. It has a kind of consciousness that you have to connect to and make your intentions known to it. The system explained. Oh, so it has to be like the first time I connected to it. Gustav held his chin as he muttered. Although I have to warn you to be prepared. If your Yarki is truly like you speculated, prepare to be drained of energy. Since you made it run out of energy completely, it will need a buttload of energy from your immune system to jumpstart itself. The system added. Gustav's eyes squinted as he heard that. I need to attend this Mr. Gon's party today. Or should I cancel? Gustav questioned. That's up to you, the system stated and kept quiet afterwards. Gustav sat on his bed with a look of contemplation. He had done research on Mr. Gon and found out that he was the current CEO of a clothing brand. Gustav already thought of how he would make use of this man, but without going to his party, that would be impossible. Looks like he'll just have to connect to the Yarki later. I don't want to risk losing all my energy and becoming unable to defend myself just in case something happens, Gustav decided as he stood up to go do his daily routine. Underscore within a luxurious-looking living room that was similar to a large hall. A man sat in the dining area with exotic foods of different kinds on the massive dining table. 2 ladies in maid outfits stood by his side while another one was pouring wine into his glass cup as he ate. Ahead, a teenage boy and girl with similar facial features sat. They were also being served by some maids as they ate. The man had triangular-shaped blue hair with a 7-inch goatee, while the teenage boy sitting in front only had the same triangular-shaped hair. However, his face was way younger, more handsome, and he didn't have a goatee. The girl, on the other hand, almost didn't bear any resemblance to the both of them. She had white shoulder-length hair with specks of blue and a very cute but snobbish-looking expression. Her eyes were slanted but large with a pointed nose and long chin. The dining area alone was similar to the size of a large living room. Chandeliers made of exotic-looking glowing green diamonds hung from the ceiling. The entire place sparkled due to the designs everywhere. The vicinity gave off a serene vibe filled with extravagance and beauty. Every random item, design, art, or carvings in this place was extremely expensive, and would be enough to pay for an entire house. The number of workers stationed around the living and dining area was around 12 in number, but even with that, the place wasn't crowded in the slightest due to its large size. A massive man in a black business suit came in from the entrance and started walking towards the dining area. The other workers stationed around bowed their heads, slightly in respect, as they noticed him. He was almost 8 feet tall, and every step he took echoed in the vicinity. He had round eyes with an oblong-looking face and buzz-cut black hair. He arrived before the dining area and announced his arrival. "Master Gon, your loyal servant Muero has something to report," he voiced out. The man eating gestured for him to approach the dining area. "Young Miss Vera, young Master Damien." The gigantic man, known as Muero, greeted the teenage boy and girl sitting on the other end. Both of them ignored him and continued with their meal. "So, what is it?" the man referred to as Master Gon asked. "We have gotten feedback from the kid, Gustav," he stated. The girl, who was initially eating without a look of interest, suddenly raised her head and stared in the direction of Master Gon and Muero. Her eyes lit up with interest as she listened to their conversation along with the other boy. "He said he'll be attending," Muero added. "Oh, wonderful." Master Gon smiled as he heard that. "I thought he decided not to attend since we didn't get a reply. This is truly wonderful. Those idiots that said I couldn't get him to come will truly be shamed now." Master Gon's smile broadened even more as he said, "I told you, Master Gon, he won't be." Before Muero could complete his sentence, Master Gon interrupted. "I told you not to use normal logic for that kid. He's different," Master Gon voiced out. Muero is an idiot. If you had witnessed his prowess personally, you wouldn't label him as an ordinary-minded person," the girl known as Vera suddenly voiced out. The boy opposite her, known as Damien, nodded in agreement with what she said. Muero was unable to say anything and felt awkward even more than he did before. Vera suddenly stood up. "I'm done. I can't eat anymore," she said as she pushed the chair backwards and started walking out of the dining area. All right, dear, just make sure you lay off training. For now, you should still continue resting," Master Gon voiced out as the girl walked away. She didn't reply and just kept moving. When she got to the corridor, her legs wobbled as she swayed towards the side and leaned her left shoulder against the wall. She placed her hand on her chest as her breathing became hurried, and her face became flushed. "He's coming," she muttered underneath her breath with a look of excitement. Hours later, it was already daybreak, and Gustav was done with all his routines. He had even gone to check out their storage room to store some of the mixed breeds he hunted the day before. Chapter 319. Apparently, the party was going to begin around 2 in the afternoon, so he still had about 4 hours to do whatever he wanted to. He decided to spend this time channeling his bloodline even more. He decided not to try connecting to the Yarki till he was out of the party. "Well," he said, "if I can attend, I get to ask for whatever I want. It'll just show up for a short duration," Gustav said internally as he closed his eyes to start channeling his bloodline. Some hours later, Gustav opened his eyes when he sensed someone approaching his door. He stood to his feet and walked towards the living room. Calm. The person knocked twice as they arrived in front of his door. "Who's there?" Gustav asked. "I'm here to see you, Gustav," the person responded from the other end. Gustav found this voice to be a little familiar, and from his perception he could make out the physique of the person to be a male in a suit. SSHH. He gestured for the door to open and stared at the person on the other end. Gustav's eyes widened slightly as he stared at the person who was knocking. This person had brown hair, slanted, cold-looking eyes, and was wearing a blue business suit. The atmosphere turned intense as he stared into Gustav's eyes like he was staring into his soul. "So we finally meet." "Gustav," the known man voiced out as he walked forward. I will let myself in, he said with a light chuckle as he walked into Gustav's apartment. Hung Ja's elder brother, young Joe. Gustav turned around as he stared at the back of the man who had just walked into his apartment. What is he doing here? Gustav wondered. Young Joe sat on the sofa in front, crossed his leg with gracefulness, and stared at Gustav, who was still standing at the door with a dumbfounded expression. What do you want? Gustav asked, while squinting his eyes with a look of suspicion. No need to be alarmed. I only came here to talk. Be a good host and get me a cup of tea, young Joe stated. Gustav took 2 steps forward and stared at young Joe with a wary look, trying to read him. Is there a need for you to be alarmed? Or maybe you have something to hide from the brother of your former classmate? Young Joe voiced out playfully when he noticed Gustav was still standing there. There's always a need to be alarmed when a stranger walks into my home, Gustav stated. You had B. Before Gustav could complete his statement, Hung Joe interrupted. Like I said, I only came here to talk. Have a seat, Hung Joe stated. Gustav still had a suspicious look, but then he could tell that Hung Joe didn't come here with nefarious intentions, so he walked forward and took a seat opposite Hung Joe. Gustav was still on guard, but he appeared to look fine and unbothered after taking his seat. Gustav stylishly tapped a button behind his left ear and asked, So, what did you want to talk about? 1 hour later, Gustav came out of the apartment looking extremely handsome in a nice long red suit and white inner t-shirt along with a tie and black trousers. He was like a whole package with the way he was dressed. His hair was looking extra smoother, along with his golden-colored irises. Gustav walked gracefully towards the stairways with his long coat swimming behind him like a cape. A limo-like hover car was waiting for him downstairs. He happened to bump into Phil on his way down, who had a look of astonishment on his face. He greeted Gustav with excitement and asked about the occasion while following after Gustav. Gustav chatted with him a little till they got downstairs. Wait till big sis Angie sees you this way. I wonder what her reaction would be, Phil shouted out as he started running back up the stairs. Gustav wanted to tell him not to bother because he was already late and wouldn't be able to wait, but the boy had already sped off. The 2 men in a suit standing in front of the vehicle bowed slightly as they greeted Gustav. The door of the vehicle opened up in front of Gustav, and he moved in. Switch, GI. In a few seconds, they sped off into the distance, and moments later they left Angie and Phil arrived downstairs. Didn't you say he was here? Angie said as she pulled Phil by the ear. Stop trying to prank Big Sister, Angie said as she turned around with a disappointed look. No, I swear he was here, Phil said as he looked around, wanting to call anyone in the vicinity to bear him witness. However, those who were gathered here when they saw the luxurious-looking vehicle had gone back to minding their businesses after Gustav left. I have been giving him space since we got back, so I want to disturb his training. Maybe I should just listen to Glade's advice and become more assertive. Angie thought as she climbed the steps with a slightly frustrated expression on her face. Several minutes later, Gustav arrived at a part of the city that was kind of isolated. It was built to look like a mini-estate, with several houses that were well secured with lots of security operatives stationed at the entry points. Other luxurious vehicles were also moving into the entry point. They were scanned by blue light before they were given access. In no time, the vehicle Gustav was being transported in was also given access. This place was large enough to have roads like outside that led to different places. Lots of well-trimmed, beautiful flowers could be seen around. However, among all the buildings, a large castle-like building stood out in the midst. This was where everyone was heading to. Luxurious hover cars parked by in rows and columns ahead could be seen. There were more than 100 of them, which proved just how many guests would be attending the event. Gustav came out of his vehicle the moment it parked and started moving towards the entry point of the large house. Chapter 3:20. Gustav came out of his vehicle the moment it parked and started moving towards the entry point of the large house. Other people were also seen in the vicinity with luxurious-looking outfits moving into the castle-like green and gold-colored building. Large, muscular-looking men in tight combat bodysuits could be seen standing at the entrance, confirming the invitation of every guest before giving them access. Gustav was being followed on both sides by the men who had brought him here. When they arrived at the entrance, they were immediately given access the moment the guards noticed these men. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Sounds of conversations could be heard all around the place as the guests who were familiar with themselves greeted one another. Gustav wasn't surprised by the turnout of rich people to the party because Mr. Gone happened to be among the top 5 richest men in the city. He, of course, headed a big family known as the Aaron family, which was also one of the top families in the city. Among them all, he was the youngest head of a family in the city. However, today was his 70th birthday. Some of the guests recognized Gustav as he walked in, but some did not because not only did he look different in person due to the stressful test, he also looked extremely sophisticated. Gustav arrived at the main living room, which was like a large hall. He could see people numbering in the hundreds gathered in the well-designed and beautiful seating area. Even though the number of people here today was over 100, the main living didn't look crowded at all due to the size. Even after observing the faces of many of the guests, Gustav couldn't find a single one of them dressed brashly. His get-up today wasn't his doing. Mr. Gone had arranged his clothing. If it wasn't due to that, he would have dressed in a casual outfit. Gustav could see the high table, which was opposite the sitting area. Everyone in the normal sitting area was facing the people sitting in the high table area. At the moment, they were watching a group of young maidens in purple and pink outfits perform a musical choreography. They danced gracefully, moving like swans, and attracting the attention of the guests. Light music-filled and melodies filled the room, adding even more beauty to these ladies' moves. Gustav moved towards the eastern side and sat somewhere in the middle that wasn't preoccupied. The men walking by his side earlier went to different spots to stand, while one of them went up to the podium area where the high table was positioned. On the high table area, aside from Mr. Gone, who was dressed in royal blue robes along with his spiky hair and cool party glasses, the rest were 3 middle-aged-looking men and 1 woman. These 4 looked extremely haughty with fierce eyes. It was obvious that they were not ordinary people. From time to time, they would occasionally share conversations, and the others in front would be unable to hear due to the distance. Not only old people attended Mr. Gone's birthday party. Some youngsters who were offsprings of prominent families also attended. From the moment Gustav walked in, most of them noticed him and couldn't just stop staring at him. While the performance was going on in front, some of them sitting together discussed Gustav's arrival. The number 1 participant, Gustav, is here. Why do you all call him number 1 when there are others who haven't displayed their abilities but are already enlisted without having to participate in the test phase? Oh, are you talking about the special class candidates? I also heard about them. Apparently, those are the strongest, and until we have seen their abilities, Gustav cannot be labeled as number 1. It doesn't change the fact that he's very strong, though. You all have forgotten that he passed the special test, so he's practically also a special class, even though it hasn't been announced. I heard that he managed to perform a big feat at the finals. Gustav's perception was able to cover the entire hall, so he could hear the words of these youngsters as they discussed with each other, but he wasn't bothered. One of the men who escorted Gustav to this place had already informed Mr. Gone of Gustav's arrival. Oh, isn't that the young lad who earned himself the title of number 1? The young lad known as Gustav. Looks like he was invited too. I must make my children share a conversation with him today. That kid has a bright future. Some of the influential parents who arrived with their children saw this as an opportunity to make connections with him. Mr. Gone smiled from his sitting position as he noticed that Gustav had already attracted half of the guests' attention towards himself. This was one of the effects he was aiming to achieve. A particular girl with pink hair and blue strands sat in front with a tensed expression as she occasionally turned to the side to glance at the people behind her. The boy beside her looked similar to Mr. Gone with his pointy blue hair. However, at the moment, he wasn't paying attention to the girl. His attention was more focused on the beautiful maidens performing in front. He licked his lips as he stared at one of them with glaring intentions. His eyes suddenly glowed up as he stared in the direction of the maiden with long black hair among the 12. The lady started feeling slightly uncomfortable as she danced. His eyes paraded her body from her head to her chest area. He swallowed saliva as he prepared to move his vision down, but then he felt someone staring at him. He turned to stare at the middle of the high table and noticed Mr. Gone staring at him. Mr. Gone's eyes were narrowed into slits as he stared at the boy who happened to be his grandson. The boy known as Damien quickly lost the glow in his eyes and stared down to avoid eye contact. Such a shameless brat. Always using your bloodline abilities in this manner, he said internally as he shook his head and stared back at Gustav, who was sitting peacefully in the middle. Why can't he just be like this young lad, Gustav? Mr. Gone shook his head as he thought. Chapter 3:21. Master Gone, you seem to be troubled. What is the matter? The woman sitting on his left side asked with a concerned look. No, I'm not troubled at all. On the contrary, look who accepted my invitation, Mr. Gone replied as he stared at Gustav in the crowd. At the moment, the others sitting on the high table had also noticed him. Two of them had conflicted looks on their faces, while the other two had intrigued looks. One of them had a celebration for his great-grandson the other day for getting enlisted into the MBO training camp, and since he also happened to be the head of a big family, and he expected Gustav to appear at the party too. However, he had missed that one while he attended this one, which made them wonder what Mr. Gone did to make him accept. Even though the head of that family who invited him wasn't happy with his absence, which he regarded as a slap on the face, there was nothing he could do about it. No one was willing to incur the wrath of the crazy Miss Amy. You invited that mannerless swine that doesn't even respect the parents who brought him into this world, the man sitting on the far left end with orange hair and strands of gray voiced out. True, from what I remember, he slapped his mother. How can you invite such a person here, Master Gone? The other middle-aged looking man on the far right side voiced out too. About that, it's all a ruse. Just as he has said in his footage, his parents are truly clowns. Mr. Gone tried debunking their words. How could you say such a thing, Master Gone? Are you in support of children disrespecting their elders? The one on the left voiced out. Master Gone must be blinded by the young kid's talent and decided to overlook his bad character. The one on the right added. Mr. Dwayne, Mr. Uga, you have to get your facts straight before jumping to conclusions. Surely something must have happened behind the scenes to lead to such a situation, the lady beside Master Gone voiced out. Thank you for mentioning that, Lady Sill. You will all be proven wrong before the end of this event. Mr. Gone smiled and stopped speaking. The man on the right-hand side of Mr. Gone finally spoke. Do you mind enlightening us, Master Gone? His voice happened to carry more power than the others. He had a 3-inch long horn underneath his jaw with slanted eyes and spiky, silver-colored hair. Mr. Joe, I want to speak more on this topic. When the time comes, everyone will be enlightened. Master Gone smiled peacefully as he placed a finger on his party-shaded glasses and pushed them up in a cool way. In his sitting position, Gustav noticed the eyes around him, and although it made him a little uncomfortable, he acted unbothered. At this time, the ladies performing had left the stage, and now a young lady with a musical instrument similar to a piano and a guitar combined with numerous amounts of light glows on it was performing. She sang a song similar to the olden days rock music, which seemed to be the opposite of the previous performance due to the heavy sounds. Oh, my goodness, the tribome goddess Yusha was invited to perform. I never knew Master Gone was a lover of these kinds of music. The guests spoke among themselves as the singer performed with a hard but melodic voice. Master Gon seemed to like this a lot and was even vibing hard to the music while the others on the high table stared at him with a weird look. The ceremony continued as the master of ceremonies spoke from time to time to increase the liveliness of the event while inviting the next performer. Gustav initially wanted to be in attendance for about an hour before leaving, but due to the factors of not being able to meet with Mr. Gon yet, he decided to still hold on. Different kinds of superstars were in attendance today, and they all performed heartily and wished Mr. Gon a happy birthday when they were done. After some time, the guests all brought their gifts forward. The Mulm family congratulates Master Gon on his 70th birthday. We hope these dragon eggs will bring you good fortune. The crowd had astonished looks as they heard that. The rare dragon eggs that when hatched a rare mineral is found within which is able to strengthen cells by 3 times. Those who were knowledgeable recognized these massive eggs that were the size of a human with yellowish furs on their surfaces. The Koyan family congratulates Master Gon on his 70th birthday. We wish you long life and hope this ancient ornament is to your liking. The representatives of each big family went forward to present their gifts one after the other. After another hour went by, it was time to cut the birthday cake. It was brought to the front of the stage, and Master Gon had to come out while also inviting his grandkids to come and join him along with some family members in attendance. The girl with pink hair and blue strands, named Vera, was finally able to stare at the crowd when she moved to the front to take a picture with her grandfather. Her eyes immediately locked on Gustav's position, and her heart started racing. Gustav noticed someone glaring at him intensely and decided to look up to stare at the person, although he knew people had been taking glances at him occasionally. This particular glare was just too intense for him to overlook. Who is she? Gustav wondered as he locked eyes on the girl standing on the left side of Master Gon on the stage. Oh, my goodness. He just stared here. Vera felt her heart skip a beat as she quickly turned her eyes away and pretended not to stare. Her face returned back to its initial aloofness and haughtiness as she took several pictures with Master Gon. Gustav shook his head and decided to overlook this as the party continued. After cutting the cake, the guests were invited to the dance floor to pick partners to dance with. Gustav sat on his chair unbothered as he waited for the celebration to come to an end. While sitting and waiting, he suddenly heard someone call out to him from behind. "Hello, handsome. Want to dance?" It was a sweet and melodic voice. Gustav was drawn by the sound of the voice, so he immediately turned around to stare at who had just spoken. "You..." Chapter 3:22. Gustav was drawn by the sound of the voice, so he immediately turned around to stare at who had just spoken. "You..." Gustav was taken aback to see a beautiful young petite lady with purple-colored hair packed in a bang. This was the same lady who sang a song similar to Rock the other time. She was the superstar known as Goddess Yusha. "Do dance with me, Gustav. Or, am I not worthy enough to get a dance from you?" she asked. Gustav stared at her outstretched hand and then her beautiful face before looking at the dance floor, where people could be seen swaying from place to place with their partners. He turned back to stare at her before responding, "I don't know how to dance." Yusha's eyes brightened as she heard that. "I figured. Wouldn't it be too much for you to be talented in combat and also be a good dancer?" She chuckled. "So, why is your hand still outstretched?" Gustav noticed this and asked, "Grant me the privilege of teaching you," she voiced out. Most of the girls in the vicinity cursed in their minds as they noticed the exchange between both of them. They wished they had worked up the guts to ask first. However, it would seem they were too slow in making up their minds, and now Goddess Yusha had beaten them to it. They silently prayed for Gustav to turn her down. Gustav had a slightly contemplative look on his face as he thought, well, what could go wrong? I still haven't completed the goal of learning a dance move, so I might as well just use this. Gustav stretched out his right hand and placed it on hers. All right, her smile broadened as Gustav stood to his feet, and they walked towards the dance floor amidst the stares and glares of many guests. The both of them faced each other as they got to a part of the dance floor, and Yusha stretched out her palms as slow music played in the background. She told Gustav to place his palm on hers and follow her movement as they started dancing to the tune. Even with the envious gaze of some girls around them, Gustav focused on the dance lesson. This was the first time he was attending any social event. He never even knew how such things were held, which was why he didn't know how to dance. He nearly stepped on her several times as she instructed him, but due to his sharp reflexes, he was able to quickly move his foot away. Now you're getting it. You're quite the fast learner, she said as their movement became more fluid than before, garnering astonished stares from those who had their eyes on them the entire time. Gustav's left hand was gripping her thin waist, causing her body to be hugged to his as they moved. Gustav was quite triggered at first as he held the soft body of a woman again, but he slowly got used to it as they danced, telling himself this was a normal thing. Goal completed. Learn a dance move, Gustav smiled as he noticed the notification. He set it aside and decided to check the rewards later. So, out of everyone you could dance with, why me? Gustav asked as he stared into her eyes. Hello, have you met you? You're Gustav, the #1 participant in the just concluded MBO entrance test. Who wouldn't want you to dance with them at this party? She muttered while looking back into his eyes as they moved from place to place. I can sense the glares of many maidens present in today's party. If looks could burn, I would have been barbecued. Believe me, every girl present here wants a slice of you, she added brazenly. Gustav laughed lightly as he heard that. You don't seem to me like you're one of those girls who would care about such things. Even if a person was famous, you're also quite famous yourself. So it's truly surprising that you'd be interested in dancing with me. Gustav paused a statement at that point. Well, that's because I like you, she voiced out. Gustav was surprised at her open revelation. I watched your performance in the test, and it made me research about you. I know your story, and it inspired me to write a new song that I will be releasing in a few days, she smiled while narrating. Gustav didn't even know how to respond to her, as he kept staring while they danced. However, before the atmosphere could turn awkward, she spoke. I am not asking you to date me. Dancing with you is already enough. You are an awesome person, handsome, strong, charismatic, and frankly many girls' dream guy. So I just want to say you should just keep doing you. She muttered with a smile as their bodies separated from each other. This was the first time someone was praising him this way, and came at him without hidden intention. She practically tabled everything out for Gustav, and he liked that she was straightforward. They stared at each other for a while before two massive men approached them from behind. Young Miss Yusha, it's time, one of them voiced out. Oh, all right, 1 second, she said to them before turning back to stare at Gustav. Now, exchange contact with me. As of today, we are friends, and you can attend all of my concerts for free, she said cheekily to Gustav. Some minutes later, Gustav went back to his seat, checking the device in his hand, as he stared at the number Yusha gave him. She had left the event to attend another one that she was invited to perform. She seemed like a really fun person. I'd like to meet her again in the future, Gustav said internally as he drank from the cup on the table in front of him. A few girls had approached him during the time he took his seat to ask for a dance, but Gustav turned them down. Chapter 3:23. He wasn't really interested in too much socializing since he saw it as being too stressful. If any of these girls had piqued his curiosity, he would have agreed, but he didn't seem to be interested in any one of them, even though they were all rich kids. The music was cut in a few more minutes as Mr. Gon moved towards the middle of the stage to give appreciation to the guests for showing up today. He spoke for about a minute mentioning all the big families and the leaders of big families sitting in the high table area. Lastly, we have a special guest in our midst today. You all know him as the number one participant, Gustav. I'm glad he honored my invitation and attended this old man's party, Mr. Gon voiced out as he stared at Gustav from his seating position. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Everyone's attention was drawn towards Gustav. If you don't mind, my eldest grandson would like to have a bout with you, Mr. Gon proposed. I'm sure everyone would be interested in seeing the prowess of the number one participant in person, Mr. Gon added. A bout with Mr. Gon's eldest grandson. This will be interesting. Wasn't he a serial ranked, though? I remember Gustav to be Zulu ranked. The guests discussed amongst themselves as they waited for Gustav's answer. Gustav stared at Mr. Gon for a bit before answering. Fine by me. Grim, come out, Mr. Gon called out. In a few seconds, a young man who looked no older than 18 walked out from the passageway on the east side. He also had blue hair. However, there were specks of pink in different parts. He was quite huge, but he had a calm face. Gustav also walked forward, approaching the stage area. My eldest grandson Grim is already a serial rank, but you still bested him in the entrance test. Since both of you never met up during the test, he wanted a personal bout with you. Mr. Gon explained. They say you have the strength of a serial ranked, even though you're only Zulu rank. I would very much like to test out this theory. Nevertheless, if you feel that you can't face a serial rank, you can back out now. Grim voiced out as he placed his fist and palm together in a respectful martial arts style. I have no issues. It's fine with me, Gustav said with a dismissive expression. All right then, let this be the final presentation to entertain my guests. Thank you, Gustav, Mr. Gon said before moving out of the stage area, leaving them both there. No problem. I'm just going to collect more compensation from you after this, Gustav said internally as he turned to face Grim. Swin. The stage area suddenly started levitating as an energy field barricaded the four corners of the stage. This was to prevent attacks from hitting the guests. After this was done, everyone focused on the exalted stage to watch the bout between these two. Ready when you are, Gustav said without assuming a battle stance. Aren't you looking down on me too much? You don't seem bothered, neither are you on guard, Grim said as he stretched out his palm and lowered his body slightly with a smile. He assumed a nice-looking battle pose while Gustav continued staring at him unbothered. I'm not looking down on you, but this will be over soon. Gustav activated God eyes as he stared at Grim's body. Humph, that proves that you're truly looking down on me. Wait till I wipe that unbothered look off your face, he voiced out as black blades started protruding out of his body in different parts. His fist, palms, arms, neck, chest, and some other parts of his body all had blades phasing out of them. Swoosh. He dashed towards Gustav with speed while slashing out. Fining. A half-moon-shaped energy shot out of the blade in his fist towards Gustav as he arrived in front of him. Dash has been activated. Swoosh. Gustav swerved towards the left, cleanly dodging the attack, but Grim wasn't done yet. Fining. He slashed 3 more times towards Gustav at fast speed, causing Gustav to dodge towards the right and left again. Sheshhaik. Cuts appeared all over the floor behind Gustav as Grim's attack connected with them, causing a huge chunk of dust to be blown into the air. Just when Gustav finished dodging those attacks, a flying kick was already headed towards his face and was only a few centimeters away. Swoof. Gustav's body bent backwards at unimaginable speed with his back nearly touching the floor, causing Grim's entire figure to fly over him. Gustav placed his left hand on the floor and used it to support his body weight as he did a 360-degree spin with his left leg outstretched. The instant Grim landed on the ground behind Gustav after his kick missed, Gustav's right foot was already sweeping towards his face. Swayawai. He quickly placed his arms in front of his face and planted his feet firmly on the ground as Gustav's leg connected to his body, sending him sliding backwards by almost 30 feet. SSHHHHSSSHHH. Grimm's body came to a stop as he placed his hands down and stared at Gustav with an astonished look. How is he so fast and powerful without even activating his bloodline? Grimm wondered. He was also quite surprised that Gustav's leg wasn't affected even after kicking the blades on his wrist. Originally, his blades were sharp enough to cut through the toughest of steels, but Gustav was unaffected when he kicked it. The entire crowd was also in shock. Watching him perform in the holographic footage was one thing, but seeing this happen in person, they realized Gustav was more amazing than they thought. There goes my shoes again. Gustav stared at the shoes that had been ruined due to him landing that hit on Grimm. If anyone had access to his thoughts, they'd be dumbfounded. Let's finish this on time before I ruin any more of my clothing, Gustav said internally as he stared at Grimm with an intense look. I forfeit this match. Thanks for the spar, Grimm suddenly voiced out as he placed his palm and fist together before bowing slightly respectfully. Ha! Chapter 3:24. Grimm suddenly voiced out as he placed his palm and fist together before bowing slightly respectfully. Ha! Gustav exclaimed with a look of confusion. Grimm quit the spar before they went too far. He had already felt Gustav's strike without him channeling his bloodline, which made him wonder just how powerful Gustav would become the moment he activated his bloodline. Either way, he could tell that he wouldn't be able to defeat Gustav. On the contrary, he didn't want to embarrass himself in front of his grandfather's guests, so he decided to end the spar before Gustav turned him into a laughingstock. What? Why did he forfeit just like that? Sigh. Just when things were starting to get interesting. Is he so spineless that he couldn't even see the spar to the end? The guests had different opinions upon witnessing Grimm forfeit the match. Grimm paid no heed to their complaints. Even though his grandfather mostly agreed to this so that he could entertain his guests, Grimm would rather end the fight before being beaten up instead of being turned into a punching bag just for entertainment. As you all have seen, the future is very bright since we have such youngsters getting enlisted into the MBO camp, Mr. Gon voiced out as the stage descended and the barriers surrounding them disappeared. He gestured for his other two eldest grandchildren to approach the stage, which they did. Damien and Vera walked up to the stage where Gustav was standing in between Grimm and Mr. Gon. Mr. Gon asked for a photographer to take their picture together. Vera had a slightly nervous look as she stood beside her cousin Grimm, who was between her and Gustav. She wanted to speak but couldn't find the words, and her cousin in between them was like a barrier. He might be strong, but he's just an ungrateful brat who doesn't even respect his parents. I don't think forming a bond with someone is ungrateful, as this brat is worth it. Two guests voiced out from the seating position in front. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The place became a little noisy as everyone recalled the incident where Gustav disrespected his parents on camera and even went ahead to slap his mother. True, no matter how powerful one is, without morals, they're truly nothing. It would be best if my kids don't form bonds with such an uncultured child, so they don't get influenced by his lack of mannerisms. Some of the guests spoke amidst themselves. Gustav totally ignored their not-so-low voices and took pictures with Mr. Gon and his eldest grandkids. After he was done taking pictures with them, he was about to go back to his seating position when Mr. Gon spoke. Yes, we need to tune into my new media station since it will be launching by 5 p.m., Mr. Gon voiced out to everyone's hearing. This was when everyone recalled Mr. Gon created a new media station and was launching it today, the day of his birthday celebration. A special footage will be displayed to mark its opening, and I will like for everyone here to watch, Mr. Gon requested. The guests had intrigued looks on their faces as they heard that. They wondered what this special footage would entail. They could tell it would be interesting for Mr. Gon to open his media station using that. Mr. Gon, the eldest grandkids, and Gustav returned to their seating positions. It's only a few seconds to 5 p.m., So my media station will be broadcasted now, Mr. Gons said after returning to his seat. Truinen, Truinen. Holographic projections started appearing all across the place, one after the other. Even though there were less than 200 guests present, the holographic projection was about 20, so everyone had a clear view regardless of their seating position. The first thing displayed on these projections were different feeds from all over the world compiled into one. Space shuttles, roads, sports, fashion, and some other things in 12-second footage. Welcome to the newly launched GTV. A beautiful lady could be seen in a glaring yellow gown as she spoke from within a studio room. From over here, we wish Master Gon a happy 70th birthday, she added with a smile. For our first broadcast, we would like to display footage regarding the revelation of an important person. Please stay tuned, she stated as the screens turned whitish. SSHHHSSHHH. Blinn. Characters appeared on the screens in the next second. Biography of Gustav Crimson. The guests' faces were laced with surprise as they saw the title. Even Gustav himself was confused and wondered what Mr. Gon was up to. In the next second, the footage displayed was one that left shock on the faces of everyone. Pa, 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 pa. You bastard. How did I bear a child as useless as yourself? A man with dirty blonde hair and a middle-aged look was seen whipping a young boy with a belt in the middle of a playground within a neighborhood. The boy's clothes were soaked with bloodstains from the excessive whipping, but the man kept whipping him. Another young boy with black hair could be seen standing not too far away and laughing at the boy receiving the beating. The footage seemed to be recorded from the CCTV camera across the street, which was why it wasn't super clear. However, when zoomed in, it was clear enough, and the faces of these three could be seen. Dash, isn't that? Dash, the father of that kid. Then the one being beaten is him? Dash, oh, my goodness, he looks no older than 13 here. How could he subject a kid to such beatings? The guests figured out the people within the footage. Although Gustav was still younger at that time, his father's face was still practically the same as the one everyone saw on the news when Gustav slapped his mother. The footage changed a few seconds later. The next one displayed was in school, where many kids could be seen stepping on another kid's face and laughing while recording with their video recording device. Chapter 3:25. The footage changed a few seconds later. The next one displayed was in school, where many kids could be seen stepping on another kid's face and laughing while recording with their video recording device. The person on the receiving end here again was Gustav, who was being beaten up in his junior high years by his classmates. Hung Joe was the one videoing while stepping on Gustav's face repeatedly. Mr. Joe, on the high table, squinted his eyes as he noticed this. I thought I had this erased. How did they manage to get hold of this footage again? He wondered as he watched. The next footage once again displayed another scene where it was early the next morning, and Gustav walked out of the parents' house in school uniform. His mother and younger brother came out a few seconds before he did, and were standing in front of her hover car about to board it. Gustav ran towards them with a smile. And although there was no sound from the mouthing, one could tell that he was asking to follow them. His mother walked towards him and landed 3 hot slaps on his face before brushing his face with her heel shoe. She seemed to be mouthing off something as she stared at Gustav, who was writhing in pain on the ground with a ridiculing expression. This footage was also one that was being recorded by the CCTV cameras across the street within Gustav's former neighborhood. One footage after the other was displayed, which showed just how tragic and cruel Gustav's younger days had been. Not only was this being displayed here, but also across the city. Mr. Gon was quite influential, so he made sure the launching of his new media station was displayed all across the city, where hundreds of thousands of people could easily watch them. Everyone sympathized with Gustav, and now understood the reason for his hostility when his so-called parents arrived to claim a glory that didn't belong to them. They watched as the footage went on to display some more rough times from his past, which he remembered clearly, but had no idea that some of these scenes were recorded. Then about 2 or 3 footages displayed him moving with Miss Amy. Only a single footage showed her training with him, and Gustav remembered she recorded this one herself. Knowing Miss Amy, Gustav was sure they wouldn't have been able to get that footage without her consent, which meant she was also involved in the compilation of this recording. Gustav smiled lightly, and she never told me about it. Looks like she knew I was going to attend this party, Gustav said internally as the footage came to an end after 20 minutes. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The entire place became a little noisy as the guests spoke amongst one another. They were all influential people, so they recognized Miss Amy. Some of them even knew beforehand that she was his teacher, but they had assumed that his parents still had a hand in his achievement today. Now that they knew the truth, they all stared at Gustav with sympathetic looks. The media station broadcast studio was displayed again, and the lady started to explain and make a few narratives regarding the 20-minute video. This explanation made people understand better that Gustav used to be a below F-grade mixed blood, which was why his parents decided to treat him inhumanely. The city could understand the bullying that came from peers, but they didn't understand how parents would treat their own child that way. In different parts of the city, after witnessing that part of the childhood of Gustav, people were outraged. They were reminded that Gustav is their city's pride and joy since he managed to obtain the first spot in the MBO entrance test worldwide. Ever since the time of his return, the city had been visited by tourists from across the world because they wanted to see the city he grew up in themselves. This made a lot of people's businesses bloom even more in the past week. People started forming mobs as they sourced for the home of Gustav's parents. The party continued afterward, as people came forth to apologize to Gustav for their initial statements. Gustav just waved everything off and told them not to bother. Mr. Gahn smiled and excused himself as he told everyone to keep enjoying themselves. The party had practically come to an end, and people began to leave one after the other afterward, while some waited to discuss business deals with Mr. Gahn. At this point, Gustav had been crowded by the younger guests. They were all interested in exchanging conversations and contact with him. Dash, tell me again, how did you manage to pass it? Dash, did you defeat those 6 yourself? Dash, if I remember correctly, you were naked at that time. Gustav didn't really want to chase them off, but he also had a headache trying to answer them. Fortunately, he was saved when one of the guards approached him and told him Mr. Gahn wanted to have a word with him in the second living room. Finally, Gustav sighed with a look of relief as he followed after the guard. In Gustav's former neighborhood, a crowd had gathered in front of a particular home that would be quite familiar to Gustav if he was here. "Get them out of the house," one of the people shouted out. Everyone had looks of anguish, and lots of people could be seen holding sticks and poles as weapons, while some people could be seen banging on the door of an apartment. Within the apartment, a man and a woman clung to each other with looks of fear. Bang, 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 bang. The sounds of the door being banged hard echoed within the living room. "Call the cops, call the MBO, call Mr. Dennis, tell them we need help," the woman voiced out with fear. "I've done that. No one's responding to any of my calls," the man also voiced out with a shaky tone. These two were none other than Gustav's birth parents, who were hiding in their apartment after a crowd of angry mob suddenly found their way into their neighborhood looking for them. They knew this was all due to the footage that was shown a while ago. Bang, 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 bang. The banging on their front door got louder as time passed. "What do we do? They're about to break through?" the wife asked with a horrified look. Chapter 3:26. Bang, 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 bang. The banging on their front door got louder as time passed. "What do we do? They're about to break through?" the wife asked with a horrified look. The husband's voice cracked as he replied. Let's barricade it with our heavy house appliances and furniture, he suggested. The both of them quickly got to work and pushed their sofas, table, beds, and other heavy furniture towards the door to barricade it. The banging on the door reduced a bit due to the amount of load that had been placed behind. We should be able to hold on some more. Honey, keep trying to reach the cops. And MBO, Gustav's mother suggested with a slightly calm expression. The father, of course, didn't need to be told this. He was already on his device trying to do this at the moment. Breaking news. Breaking news. The house of the Oslovs is being besieged by an angry mob who have decided to take the justice of Gustav Crimson into their own hands. As you can see from the footage being recorded from above, the mob have been triggered by the compilation of Gustav's past occurrences and have decided not to back down until they have dealt with the couple. They are currently trying to break into the homes of these two showcased on the screen, and for some unknown reason, the law enforcement authorities have not shown to the scene. Different news and media outlets were displaying the same news at the moment. They were recording the apartment of Gustav's parents from above, and it could be seen that the crowd was increasing by the minute. Currently, more than 1,000 people had arrived on the scene, and most of them had weapons and sticks raised up as they shouted, "Justice for Crimson! Justice for Crimson!" In the police branch closest to Gustav's former neighborhood, the cops there watched the footage of the house being surrounded. Gren. The communication system used in the office rang out severally, announcing the calls and where they were coming from. The one that displayed Gustav's parents' house was left unanswered. "Captain Joe, aren't we supposed to act now?" One of the men asked. "No. An order has been sent from the higher-ups not to interfere until after 20 minutes has gone by." The captain, who was also standing in the corner watching, voiced out. The cops in the station had looks of astonishment and confusion on their faces as they heard that. "It's been only 10 minutes, so we can only sit here and wait," Captain Joe added. In one of the MBO command centers within the tower positioned in the heart of the city, a similar situation to what was happening in the police station was also playing out here. The MBO officers within the room asked why they couldn't interfere, but the moment they heard the name of the person who had asked them to back down, they all shut their mouths. Gustav, who was the cause of this ruckus, was sitting in a beautiful, well-designed living room, taking a sip of exotic wine in a luxurious-looking cup. Opposite him was Master Gon, who seemed to be yapping away. Grim had gone back to his quarters, but the other two, Vera and Damien, were seated at the dining area staring at Gustav and their grandfather. Maids moved about the place and served some dishes in the dining room, but Gustav had already turned down the food because he wasn't interested in spending too much time there, which was why he was seated on one of the sofas with Mr. Gon. Of course, he disguised his intentions by saying he was already full from eating in the party, so he and Mr. Gon would just get down to the business at hand. "Mr. Gon, I appreciate what you did back there, but by any chance, how did you manage to get my teacher on board with it?" Gustav asked. "Oh, you mean young Amy?" Mr. Gon asked. "Yes," Gustav answered. "We happen to be acquainted, but it's a very long story," Mr. Gon voiced out. Gustav exclaimed with a slightly suspicious look. The moment I explained my plans to her, she agreed to help. Actually, 70% of the footage compilation was sourced out by her, so I can't accept your appreciation. Mr. Gon laughed lightly as he heard that. Without her, this wouldn't have been possible because even with my vast connections, I'm unable to retrieve some part of this footage myself, Mr. Gon added. 70%? Gustav's eyes widened slightly as he heard that. He knew it wouldn't be so easy to retrieve such footage that had been practically lost in time or deliberately erased. However, didn't expect that even someone as influential as Mr. Gon would have such difficulty, and only managed to retrieve 30%. "I must thank Miss Amy properly when I see her," Gustav said internally. Although he wasn't all too bothered with what the city initially made him out to be, when he slapped his mother in front of the reporters. However, he was still grateful because he understood doing this wouldn't have been an easy task. Mr. Gone gestured for one of the guards to approach them. The guard was holding onto a square-shaped white box, which Mr. Gone passed on to Gustav. "What is this?" Gustav asked as he collected it from the guard. "Just a small gift from me to you," Mr. Gone said with a smile. Gustav held the small white casing and observed what was inside using God eyes. He noticed it was a small chip. "Play the footage stored within when you get to your home," Mr. Gone voiced out. "I managed to acquire that from a group of sneaky reporters, so be careful not to get caught next time," Mr. Gone added. Gustav had a confused expression as he heard that, but he could tell everything would still make sense to him later on after he watched the footage. Chapter 327. "So, I promised to give you whatever you willed if you were able to attend my party. Do you have something in mind?" Mr. Gone asked. Finally down to the main topic, Gustav placed his hands underneath his chin as he smiled internally. "Yes, I do have something in mind," Gustav stated and paused his speech for a few seconds before continuing. "I want to own a share of G Clothing Industries," Gustav stated. Silence. The entire place descended into silence for a few seconds as the grandkids in the dining area stared at Gustav with a weird look. Before Mr. Gone could reply, Damien spoke. "Aren't you being too brazen to ask for such? My grandfather can't possibly do that just because you attended his party. I know you're not humble, but at least try to be a little humble sometimes. Do you know how many people would give up parts of their bodies just to share a conversation with my grandfather? You were given the—" Before Damien could continue to toot away, he was interrupted by Mr. Gone. "Shut up, boy. Do not speak to my guest that way," Mr. Gone stated with an authoritative look. Damien instantly shut his mouth upon seeing his grandfather's gaze. Gustav asked, "Based on my declaration, he has done nothing wrong. Now, apologize," Mr. Gone added. Damien stood up with a frown and bowed slightly. "I apologize for my misconduct," he said. Gustav nodded slightly before speaking. "Of course, I said this with a few considerations in mind, and also a business plan." The grandkids' faces lit up with a look of interest upon hearing that. "Do you mind asking the kids to leave us for a few minutes? This is going to be a business discussion between adults," Gustav proposed with a smile towards Mr. Gone. Both of them heard from the dining area, and their faces showed dissatisfaction. "There's no way Grandpa would listen to him," Damien said internally. "You heard him. The both of you excuse us for a bit," Mr. Gone said to the both of them. Damien's eyes widened slightly in disappointment as he heard that, but he dared not disobey his grandfather. Vera didn't have a look of opposition as she stood to her feet and moved towards the passage area. A few minutes later, Mr. Gone had a look of understanding on his face. "So, you want there to be a department of fitted armored clothes with an elastic feature that don't easily get ripped even after doused in fire," he voiced out. "Basically, but of course, there will be other designs. I know you've always been wanting to go into armor designs, but because of Mr. Joe, you have been holding back. I have many ideas that will be different from the types Joe Industries create. So I will deliver the body parts of mixed breeds that are needed to craft such wares. Conversely, you guys' job will be to process the creation," Gustav explained. "I have done my research, so I know just how rare the mixed breeds parts needed are. But I can easily get access to them." Mr. Gone had a look of contemplation on his face for a few seconds before replying. "This is a really nice proposal," Mr. Gone said. "Also, I have something that is among the rarest materials in the world. If you have this, you can create top-notch armor," Gustav said as he tapped onto his storage device. "Sing. Kara, why, ch. Fragments of green rocks appeared all over the place. The moment Mr. Gone laid eyes on them, his mouth hung open. He was immediately able to recognize that these rock fragments were extremely tough. About an hour later, Gustav arrived home and instantly changed out of his outfit before heading to the bathroom to shower. He smiled as the shower rained down on him. That went better than I expected. Good thing he recognized the authenticity of that rock, he muttered. The only downside is I got a model for the prototypes before leaving for the MBO camp, Gustav said as he imagined himself posing like an idiot. He had a slightly repressed look as he spoke. Hopefully, he gets my elastic clothing armor done quickly. In a few minutes, Gustav finished showering and headed to his room after putting on pajamas. I still have the entire tomorrow to myself, so I should start the process of rejuvenating my Yarki immediately, Gustav said as he sat on his bed in a crossed leg format. Do you think it's so easy? Prepare to be indoors for the next 2 days at the very least. The system suddenly spoke. What? 2 days? Gustav said with a surprised look. I said at the very least. You might even take longer. The system scoffed as it responded. No, I can't spend 2 days indoors. I need to make it to Matilda's party, Gustav said with a worried look as he held his chin. After everything she has done, this is the first time she asked something of me, so I must at least make it up to her by showing up, Gustav stated. It's impossible to stop the process once you've started unless you plan to start it all over again after making progress, so cutting it short to attend the party is out of it. The system practically knew what Gustav was thinking, which was the reason for its statement. Humph. Then I'll just have to make sure I get it done within this night and throughout tomorrow, Gustav said as he closed his eyes with an expression of focus. His senses descended into the depths of his body and located Yarki, which was currently still darkened due to being out of energy. Now, let us begin within Angie's apartment. Her face shone a complicated expression as she stared at the news. Highlights from Mastergon's birthday party shows that young Gustav, the number MBO participant, was in attendance. On the projection, it could be seen that Gustav was dancing with a purple-haired beauty. Their bodies were glued to each other as they swayed beautifully from place to place like trees being blown by the wind. Ha! Big sis, didn't I tell you? See big bro Gustav, Phil voiced out from the side. Chapter 3:28. Ha! Big sis, didn't I tell you? See big bro Gustav, Phil voiced out from the side, while pointing at the television projection. Humph! Angie pouted as she exclaimed and stood to her feet. Where are you going, sis? Phil asked as he saw Angie walking away. I'm going to bed, Angie answered with a slightly annoyed look as she went in. Oof. I think big sis got mad. Phil muttered. It's her fault for not making her intentions known to him, Angie's mother voiced out from the side as she changed the media station. She exclaimed after noticing the news that was being displayed on the next station. As you can see. This was the state both couples were put in before the arrival of the cops. The reporter who was being displayed voiced out as the other half of the screen displayed 2 people who had been beaten black-blue. Phil, go to your room. Their mother felt the footage was too disturbing to watch for a little kid, so she sent him in. Phil had no choice but to obey and went in. On the other half of the screen, a couple that was nearly beaten to death was displayed. Their clothes had been torn apart, and bloodstains could be seen all over their body. These 2 happened to be Gustav's parents, who were assaulted by the angry mob after their house was broken into. Fortunately for them, the 20 minutes time frame given to the cops was up before the mob could send them to hell. They were saved by the cops and taken to a public hospital. According to the reports, they both survived, but are currently being charged with several offenses, child molestation included. Serves them right, Angie's mother said with a look of disgust. They brought that upon themselves, Angie's father, who was just coming from the passageway, voiced out. They are lucky the cops managed to arrive on time, he said as he sat on the sofa beside his wife. On the screen, the hospital ward was displayed, where both of them could be seen being handcuffed with some red glowing bangle-like cuffs while on the hospital bed. How could they treat their own child like that? Angie's mom voiced out with a disappointed look. Now, we understand why Gustav was always like that. Angie's father added with a look of sympathy, Darling, I have something to tell you. Angie's father turned to his wife and said, What's that? She asked. Promise me you'll be calm when you hear this, and listen to my explanation first, he said with a wry smile. Of course I will, just out with it already, she replied. I'm resigning from our workplace, Angie's father stated. Huh? What? Are you serious? Angie's mother jumped to her feet as she asked, Calm down. Didn't you promise to listen first? He voiced out while pulling her hand for her to sit. All right, I'm calm and am listening, she said while sitting. So, listen to the reason. A few minutes later, Angie's mother had a look of understanding on her face. I see. So you'll be the manager. And at the same time, you get to do scientific experiments on turning mixed breeds' body parts to armors, she said with a contemplative expression. Exactly. Although I can't be a father to this kid, I can at least help him with this, Angie's father stated. Also, Mastergon's G Industry is now in partnership with him, so there won't be a lack of resources unlike our current workplace, he added. That's really good. This makes me feel even more sympathetic for the kid. Sigh. He had to become so capable at such a young age due to his trauma, Angie's mother stated. We weren't there for him before, but now we can be. Let's make sure he is surrounded with enough love and care, Angie's father said with a smile. Back in his apartment, Gustav was still trying to pass his intentions across to his Yarkie's consciousness, but, of course, it was proving difficult. He knew this was still going to take some time to achieve, so he kept probing and probing. The whole night was spent doing this. The next morning was when Gustav recalled that he still had to perform the system's daily tasks. The long night probing had yielded some rewards, and Gustav was starting to receive some signals from his Yarkie even though they were barely significant. If he stopped now, all that effort would be wasted, and he'd have to start again. They'll push your daily task for today back by 1 day, which means by tomorrow you'll be performing 2 daily tasks, one for today and the other for tomorrow. Gustav suddenly heard the voice of the system in his head. Thanks, Gustav said internally. You still have to perform them, though, and double penalty if you're unable to successfully complete either one of tasks, Gustav. I take back my appreciation within Miss Amy's apartment. She walked across her sitting room with a slightly disturbed expression on her face while answering a call. Are you saying it has been buried underneath the ground for over 200 years? Yes, from our research. This is so. How did the investigation on the other borders go? No luck. We haven't found any clue. So we can only make use of the lead in our hands. Are you going to make use of the red shadow? It seems I have no choice. We have to find the developer first. From there, I will know how to proceed. The T-67 device is still in your possession? Did you think I would leave it in the hands of you losers? And I will leave here to Swarm Hill City in less than a week. Get my equipment ready, Miss Amy commanded before ending the call. She moved over to one of the sofas and took her seat. She reached out and grabbed the teacup on the side before taking a sip. I have to make sure the kid remains safe till he leaves for the MBO camp, especially since that bastard Young visited him, Miss Amy said after lowering the cup. Chapter 329. He must be on edge now that he can no longer track the streams of energy coming from the rock. I will make sure this leads to your downfall, Miss Amy stated while squinting her eyes. Back in Gustav's apartment, the atmosphere had a kind of serene vibe to it. Everything was stationary, and it seemed as if there was no life present within this place. Gustav, who was in a cross-legged position on his bed, was like a statue as he closed his eyes. Even the sound of breathing couldn't be heard coming from him. He tuned his concentration to its very peak as he focused on his Yarkie. He was starting to get more signals from his Yarky as time passed. The Yarky was like a dead black flame earlier when it ran out of energy, but as Gustav started forwarding his intentions to it would at times vibrate, while sometimes there would be a small glow on a part of it before it died out again. Occurrences like this kept happening for the next 7 hours. Within a hospital ward, 2 people could be seen in patients' outfits with their beds placed side by side. These 2 happened to be a man and a woman, handcuffed and isolated from the rest of the patients within the hospital. 2 police officers stood in different positions within the ward. A boy with curly black hair was by the side of this couple, speaking with a furious tone. He was dressed in a pure white uniform with a red blood-shaped logo on his right breast pocket area. "This is all his fault. That bastard trash." He shouted out, "Sir, please, there are other patients in this place." "Keep your voice down," one of the nurses at the door cautioned. "Shut up, you wench," the boy voiced out and stared at her. Puum, a strange force knocked her backwards, causing her to fall and slide across the hospital floors. The police officers quickly drew their weapons and pointed them at him. He gazed at them with murderous intentions, however, before he could perform any actions. "Endrick, stop it," the man on the bed towards the left voiced out. "We don't want you compromising your enlistment into the Emyo camp. Behave yourself," he added. The blue glow in his eyes slowly dimmed as he stared back at his parents. "Mom, Dad, he'll handle this," he said as he started walking towards the door. "Endrick, don't do anything stupid. Your brother is now a sensational big shot you cannot." Before his father could complete his sentence, Endrick interrupted, "Don't make me laugh. He's not a sensational anything. He's just a fake special class who hasn't even received any training. I'm better than him," Endrick voiced out before walking out. "Son, you..." Endrick's father stopped his speech as he noticed Endrick was already gone. "Yes, get revenge for me, my boy." Endrick's mother laughed like a depraved lunatic after seeing the rage in Endrick's eyes before he left. "What are you saying, woman? We are the cause of our own problems," Endrick's father said with a look of annoyance. "Toy, the reason for our problem is the first child I mothered. Let my second child handle it." "Ha ha ha," Endrick's mother voiced out. "You're sick in the head. Woman, sick. How have you not seen the errors of your ways?" "Ha ha ha, my only error was that child." Back in his apartment, Gustav had managed to get his intentions known to the consciousness of his Yarky after so long. At the moment, it was already late in the evening, and the next day was when Matilda's party would be holding. His Yarky finally started absorbing energy from his body, but he had no idea how long it would take. Even after 2 hours went by, his Yarky was still black-colored, although it was a little lighter than before. Gustav knew it hadn't even managed to kickstart itself yet. Even though it already took a lot of energy from Gustav, it hadn't managed to charge itself yet. Gustav sat in place for another 1 hour before finally, free, the Yarky lit up with a pinkish glow and started swaying like a flame again. "Good. You managed to rekindle it faster than I expected." Gustav heard the voice of the system in his mind. "Humph, how could you doubt my talents? I instructed my Yarky on a more efficient way to jumpstart itself with my energy, and it worked," Gustav responded. "Oh, good. You're finally making use of the intelligence points I gave you, Gustav. Either way, make sure to keep its consumption of energy steady. It has only managed to recharge a little bit over 1%. It's still going to take some time for it to be filled," the system explained. "You think I don't know that?" Gustav asked internally with a slightly annoyed tone. "Oh, you do? What a surprise. Gustav." The system stopped speaking afterwards, so Gustav could focus on feeding the Yarky with energy. Gustav could decide to move about now, but he wanted to focus on guiding the energy consumed by the Yarky himself because, according to the system, the Yarky could take energy from any part of the body it resided within. If it were to focus on Gustav's liver, kidney, or heart and draw energy from there. He would be a goner. Just like that, another 2 hours went by, and it was around 8 p.m. at the moment. Gustav had only managed to recharge his Yarky with 10% of power, and he was still going, hoping to get it finished before the start of the party tomorrow. Calm, calm, calm. He heard a loud knock coming from the door. Gustav had purposely put a small sign in front of his door saying he would be unavailable during this time, which was why people who came around for one reason or the other didn't bother knocking when they saw this. However, whoever this person was, they didn't pay heed to the sign. Calm, 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 calm. The knocking sounds became more aggressive in the next round. Gustav still ignored, thinking the person would leave after a few more knocks. However, the knocks continued. I know you're in there. Open this door, or I'll knock it down. A loud, angry teenage male voice could be heard all across the passageways. Chapter 330. I know you're in there. Open this door, or I'll knock it down. A loud, angry teenage male voice could be heard all across the passageways. Gustav's eyebrows repeatedly twitched as he heard the voice. I know that voice, he muttered. Calm, calm, calm. The banging on the door increased even more after the person heard no response coming from the other side. Gustav made a low hum sound and continued his meditation. He came seeking his own end. But I can't attend to him until I am finished with this, Gustav said internally as he blocked out all distractions and continued to focus on what he was doing. The person who happened to be at the door knocking was none other than Gustav's younger brother, Endrik. He stood at the door and kept on knocking for about 30 minutes, and still there was no reply. When some of the neighbors on the same floor came out to check, he shouted at them to mind their business since he was here for Gustav and not them. Endrik could tell that Gustav was indoor, but for some reason didn't want to answer his calls. Endrik's forehead creased up as he stared at Gustav's door with a look of anguish. Master JK also refused to come with me because of fear of your teacher. Today I will show them who is better. After I kill you here, the MBO will have no choice but to choose me, and I will be protected. This was Endrik's thought process as he distanced himself from the door a bit, moving backward in small steps. He suddenly dashed forward and threw his foot upwards to stomp on the door. Intruder alert! Protocol 02 activated. Just as his foot was inches away from stomping on the door, this alarm rang out, and a mini cannon suddenly phased out of the left side of the wall. Bang! Endrik was sent hurling towards Angie's apartment as the beam slammed into him. It totally took him by surprise, so he wasn't able to dodge. Bang! Bang! Endrik slammed into Angie's apartment door and broke through it before slamming onto the ground. The entire family was surprised as they watched the young boy sliding across the floors of their living room. Ha! They exclaimed from the dining area as they stopped eating their food. Who are you? Angie's father asked with a confused look as he stared at the destroyed door, and then the line of destruction that followed after this boy's body due to him sliding across the floors. However, Endrik didn't reply. He jumped up with a look of anguish and dashed forward out of the apartment. Swoosh! He was pretty fast and disappeared through the destroyed door in nearly an instant. Doesn't he look a bit familiar? Phil said with a look of contemplation. Angie stood up from the dining area and moved to the middle of the living room that was currently in shambles. 2 of their sofas had been broken apart due to this. I think the banging sound we've been hearing was coming from. Before Angie could complete her sentence, they heard the sounds of shooting. Tuian, Tuian, Tuian. Angie quickly rushed out of the apartment as her brother followed behind her along with their father and mother. They arrived at the passageway, where Endrik could be seen tackling a cannon that was protruding from the left side of Gustav's door. What's going on? They all had the same thing on their minds. Endrik dashed towards the side, dodging one more shot, and reached out his hand. Fum! The cannon suddenly stopped moving as an invisible force was blocked its muzzle and held it in place. Hiya! Endrick screamed out as he pulled his arms backward with force. SHSSHHHRKKKKYYYHH. The cannon was ripped right out of the wall, along with several wires sticking out behind it. Bam! 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 Several parts of the wall collapsed due to this, causing a loud noise to ring out as more people came out of their apartments to check what was going on. A smirk appeared on Endrick's face as he walked forward and repeatedly stomped on the cannon before kicking it away. Good thing my reaction speed was fast enough for me to input a small telekinetic barrier before me, which reduced the impact of its shot. Endrick felt he could have been really injured by now. Bloodstains could be seen on his left shoulder area, but it was obvious that this was only a flesh wound. Endrick stood in front of Gustav's apartment and was about to hit his door again when he heard a voice from behind. "What are you doing?" He turned around and noticed it was a girl clad in ash-colored shorts and a red crop top. She had silver and pink-colored hair with 2 short horns on her forehead. "Mind your business," Endrick voiced out as he turned back around to face the door again. "This is my business. Either you tell me what you're doing here or get out." Angie's eyes squinted with a look of suspicion as she walked forward. "And what if I don't?" Endrick asked with an annoyed tone as he turned around to face her. "I will make you leave." Angie raised her hands to her head as she spoke and tied her hair in a bang while staring at the 57 kid. She felt he looked awfully familiar, but couldn't picture where she had seen him. From her viewpoint, he looked to be around 15 years of age, 1 year younger than she was. However, she had no idea how wrong she was. "You have no right to disturb the peace of this place. Go home, kid. You can see the sign on the door that says do not disturb. I wonder who trained such a vulgar kid such as yourself," the neighbors voiced out with looks of discomfort as they stared at Endrick. They still saw him as a kid, so no one tried calling the cops or anything. Also, they felt since it was Gustav's apartment, there was no way he wouldn't be able to handle this kid himself. Chapter 331. Angie and Endrick stared at each other fiercely for a few seconds until Endrick started laughing. "So, you're the bitch he's always with." Maybe I should deal with you first?" Endrick voiced out. "Such vulgar tongue. You lack manners," Angie voiced out. "Shut up," Endrick shouted out as he pushed his right arm forward. Angie suddenly felt a strong force grabbing hold of her and squeezing her tight. She found herself being lifted off the ground in the next second. Gasp! The neighbors were shocked as they witnessed the scene of Angie being easily subjugated. As she tried to free herself, it felt like her body was being crushed in between a gigantic, invisible palm. "So, you're only so-so. I thought he had more impressive people around him." "Humph." Endrick voiced out as he flung his arm forward. Bam! Angie's body slammed into the wall on the other side and broke through it. "You bastard. How dare you touch my sister?" Phil was the first to react before his mother and father, and then the rest of the neighbors. All of them started running towards Endrick with looks of anger. "Begone," Endrick said as he slapped both palms together. Fulham! An invisible force radiating with so much pressure was sent out from his left and right side, forming a wall. Both invisible walls collided with the neighbors as they were pushed backward. "Oh, I mustn't hurt civilians." Endrick remembered something and stretched out both arms to pause his telekinetic barriers from sending the people flying through the windows and slamming into the wall, but he kept them active to prevent the neighbors, along with Angie's parents and brother, from interfering. They kept banging the barrier, but it proved to be unbreakable. "Humph!" Endrick turned around and to face Gustav's apartment's door again. He inched forward and was about to attack it when, swoosh! A silver streak suddenly appeared behind him with a fist headed for the left side of his face. Endrick was fast enough to react by putting a small telekinetic barrier between himself and the fist. However, he had underestimated the force that this punch carried. The fragile-looking girlish first tore through the twisted and tightened space in between them and slammed heavily into his cheek. Bang! Endrick was sent hurling towards the front as he slammed his head into Gustav's door, causing a loud sound to ring out. Angie, who was the culprit, didn't pause for a second. The moment Endrick's face slammed into the door and his body was sent hurling backward, Angie had already jumped up with speed and spun around with her legs sent out. Bam! Her knee slammed into Endrick's chest, sending him flying towards the left side of the passageway. He slammed into the ground and started sliding backward. SSHHHSSHHH. Now leave before you make me do worse, Angie said as she cleaned the blood on her face and stared at Endrick in front, whose body just came to a stop. How dare you lay hands on me, bitch? How dare you? Endrick shouted out with a look of rage as he stood to his feet, and his curly hair started being blown backward. Leah. Before Angie could complete his sentence, Endrick's eyes turned completely blue as he pushed his hand forward. VVRHHHHHHHHHHH. The entire passageway crumbled in an instant as a powerful force raged through it and slammed into the unprepared Angie. Bang! The sound of bones cracking reverberated across the place as Angie's body was sent flying backward with immense speed. Bang! She slammed into the wall on the other end and went through it. Cracks appeared all over the passageway as well as the walls, which started to crumble after a few seconds. Kyra, Big Sis Angie, Phil shouted out with a look of hatred as he stared at the massive hole on the wall behind him that Angie's body flew through. Now, does anyone else want to interfere? Endrick shouted out while walking along the cracks on the path in front of Gustav's apartment. Angie opened her eyes as she felt her sore body falling through the air. She noticed she was currently in between the building that housed their apartment and the building opposite them. Her forehead squeezed together as a third horn grew out of it. Swayaya. She spun her body around in midair before landing on the ground, while slamming her right hand to the ground. Boom! A visible cloud of dust covered the entire vicinity even though it was dark at the moment. As the dust cleared, Angie could be seen within, slowly pushing herself upwards as her body vibrated due to pain. Blurg! She vomited a mouthful of blood onto the sand as she stared at her left arm. It was twisted backward. Her joint had been dislocated. Her entire body was aching from head to toe. She had multiple internal injuries, but her face was looking extremely fierce at the moment. She reached out her right hand and grabbed her left arm before forcing it back into position. Angie moaned in pain as more blood trickled from her sleeves and nose. Swoosh! Even with her almost broken-down body, she dashed forward and ran across the surface of the building. Bang! A loud glass-breaking sound reverberated across the place as Angie's speed caused the destruction of all the windows on this side of the building. She got to the third floor in a matter of milliseconds and reached the last floor a moment later. Endrick paused in front of Gustav's door as he turned towards the left and noticed Angie entering the building from the window. You again. Endrick was about to point out. Structural analysis, Endrick said as he and Angie were about to clash again. Angie breathed in and out profusely. She felt her energy depleting at an insane rate and her body about to give out due to acquired injuries. But she had vowed to herself to deal with this person that had jeopardized the safety of the people around her. Just as both of them were about to bolt forward, the apartment door on Endrick's side opened up. Step, step, step. For some reason, everywhere turned silent as the sounds of these footsteps echoed across the passageway. Who is causing so much ruckus at this hour? A familiar voice wafted into everyone's ears as they turned to stare at the person who had just walked out of the apartment. Gustav. Everyone voiced out as they stared at the almost 6-foot-tall kid with dirty blonde hair. Gustav stood in front of Endrik and stared into his eyes from above before looking at the surroundings that were currently in shambles. He saw the cracks everywhere and turned to stare at the neighbors who had looks of panic earlier, but were now looking a bit relieved after seeing Gustav. Finally, he turned to stare at Angie by the side, who was looking all bloody and battered, before turning back to stare at Endrik. I hope you came here prepared to die. Chapter 332. Finally, he turned to stare at Angie by the side, who was looking all bloody and battered, before turning back to stare at Endrik. I hope you came here prepared to die. Gustav's voice suddenly turned cold as he spoke. The neighbors in the vicinity felt the chill in the atmosphere as Gustav moved 2 steps forward. How dare you lay hands on my parents? Today will be your end, Endrik voiced out as he reached out for Gustav. I will not be sending you to join your so-called parents in the hospital. Instead, they'll be sending you to a place they haven't visited yet. Gustav's eyes glowed crimson as he also reached out his hand. The afterlife, as Gustav voiced out. His palm collided with that of Endrik's, causing both of them to be sent flying backwards as they separated from each other. Bang! K-R-R-Y-Y-Y-Ch-Ch-Ch-Ch-Ch. Crumble! Crumble! Shockwaves spread from the point of impact, causing more intense cracks to appear all over the place. A small hole appeared on the side of the passageway as that part of the building caved in, causing wall fragments to fall into the apartment below. At the moment, the neighborhood within the building had heard the noise and were all coming out of their apartments with looks of panic. This time, I'm ready for you. Once I end you, there'll be no more issues. Endrik voiced out from the other end of the passageway. Gustav was also on the other end, picking himself up after his body collided with the wall, causing a caved-in lines to appear on the side of the wall. Gustav looked around him and could see the neighbors panicking due to the appearance of the last floor that looked like it would crumble any time soon. I can't use too much power here, Gustav said to himself as he stared at Endrik, whose eyes were glowing a sinister blue color. Gustav. Angie was about to call out to Gustav when he suddenly dashed forward. Swan. A trail of dust was left in his wake as he pushed his fist forward upon arriving in front of Endrik. Endrik seemed to have predicted this and made use of the same move he used against Angie, sending ripples of telekinesis forward, which turned the entire environment into shambles, causing destruction. However, to his surprise, Gustav's fist enlarged, becoming so massive it covered the entire passageway. Size manipulation has been activated. His entire fist blocked Endrik's telekinetic waves and managed to push them back due to the force of Gustav's speed. Before Endrik could react, a massive fist similar to the size of a truck slammed into him. Bam! The entire wall behind was blasted to smithereens as Endrik was sent flying out of the building along with crumbling parts of the wall. The 7th floor vibrated intensely like it was going to collapse due to the massive punch. 300 EP. Gustav's fist slowly reduced back in size till it went down to its normal size. He stared ahead where a hole could be seen in the building on the other end, where Endrik's body could still be seen slamming into the walls and creating more holes. Bang, 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 bang. Gustav turned around to stare at the neighbors. Seeing that everyone was safe, he turned to look ahead again. Thump. Gustav leaped through the hole he created from the earlier punch. His body flew across the air, passing over several buildings in front. He could now see the other street up ahead, but Endrik was nowhere to be found. Gustav suddenly felt an unknown force wrapping around his body. Before he could react to it, his entire body was yanked from the air and slammed into the road up ahead. Bang, bang. K-R-R-Y-Y-Y-Ch-Ch-Ch-Ch-Ch. Gustav's body rolled across the road repeatedly, causing the road to split apart. Via, a large projectile was headed towards his rolling body. From above, Gustav slammed his hands to the ground, causing his body to fly into the air as he did a flip, dodging the descent of a large cylindrical object. SSHHHSSSSHHH. His legs slid across the ground in a backwards motion as he leaped to the side to dodge another one of these projectiles. Bang! Apparently, it was a part of the roof towards the building on the side. Gustav leaped towards the cylindrical object that was twice his size and kicked it, causing his body to fly towards the side of the building. Z, Z, Z. Gustav jumped from the side of the building towards the other side of another building in a zigzag format till he landed on the roof of the building on the left side. Bam! He stared at Endrik, who was on the top of the 4-story building adjacent to the one he was standing on. Endrik had his right arm raised up, and in the air above him were numerous objects of different sizes and proportions floating. He stared at Gustav and smirked before throwing his hand forward. Sprint has been activated. Gustav activated Sprint and dashed across the rooftop in a zigzag format, dodging some of the projectiles. Sprint making him faster did not mean the speed at which these projectiles were being sent towards him wasn't quick. Gustav arrived at a part of the rooftop that had a massive hole due to Endrik's antics, so he had to leap. Thump! He dodged one projectile again, but another one was heading for him while he was still in midair. Gustav's left arm transformed into that of the mutated bull as he punched the massive 4 meters large roofing, causing it to blast into several smaller pieces. Gustav landed on the edge of the rooftop before leaping towards the building Endrik was currently standing on. Fulham! As his body traveled through the air, Endrik suddenly pushed out his left palm. An invisible wall slammed into Gustav in midair, sending him spiraling towards the building he just leaped out of. Bang! Gustav's back slammed into the wall, causing cracks to appear all over. Chapter 333. Just as he wanted to leap away, Endrik closed his palm together like he was grabbing something, and Gustav felt his body being wrapped by a massive tight force. Endrik pulled his left arm backwards, causing Gustav's body to be drawn towards him. "You will know how powerful my will is today," Endrik voiced out as he tightened his fist even more, causing Gustav's body to make low popping sounds. He expected Gustav to start screaming, but to his surprise, no matter how much he squeezed his fist, Gustav just stared at him from above. "Pathetic," Gustav suddenly voiced out as he started to separate his arms that were forcefully tightened towards his body. The invisible arm surrounding his body started loosening as he pushed intensely, causing his muscles to bulge. Endrik's eyes widened as he stared at his left palm being separated. Bam! Gustav freed himself from the telekinetic grip and landed on the roof. Before Endrik could make sense of what was happening, Gustav had already dashed forward. Combination has been activated. Sprint plus dash. This time to him, it was as if Gustav teleported to his front. Gustav's right hand was already outstretched as he reached out to grab Endrik's face. His palm ripped through layers of telekinetic protections that Endrik set up and grabbed his head in the next moment. "Now, let's go to change location to a place where there will be no witnesses," Gustav said to his hearing as he pulled Endrik's entire body forward using his head. Swissush. Fulham. All Endrik could see was lines and blurriness as the building they were formally started appearing more distant with every moment before disappearing from his line of sight completely. Before he could get used to Gustav's speed and try performing an attack, Gustav threw him forward as he leaped over another building. Swoosh! Gustav threw his legs forward, which slammed into Endrik's face, further catapulting him into the distance. In the next moment, Gustav landed on the ground and dashed forward again in an insanely short time. His body traveled through the street with extreme speed, passing by several buildings towards the right and the left. Thump. He leaped upwards again and grabbed onto Endrick's descending body through his head before landing and dashing forward into the forest area. Whoosh! In a few seconds, they had left the neighborhood behind and arrived in the forest area. At this time, Endrick had already adapted to the speed and pulled off a telekinetic attack. Bam! Gustav was able to react in time by placing his arms in front of his chest in an X format, but was still sent sliding backwards by a few feet. Endrick's body was still flying through the air at the moment, since Gustav suddenly had to let him go because of the attack. However, he managed to spin his body several times before stabilizing his fall and landing on his 2 feet. Endrick and Gustav were now several hundreds of feet distance from each other. However, Gustav wasn't bothered because they were now within the sparse forest region. He didn't want others to get hurt because of his fight, and he also didn't want to reveal most of his abilities. So this was the perfect battleground for him. Smirk. Gustav smirked at Endrick as he dusted his pajamas. I could end this battle quickly, but what would be the fun in that? I have to make sure I torture you well at the very least before sending you packing, so in your next life, you'll choose to live a better life with better parents too. Of course, since these ones don't even have the right to be called parents, Gustav voiced out. Humph, I will make you eat your words, Endrick voiced out as his eyes turned blue once again. Ftru, 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 ftru. Trees in the vicinity started being uprooted from the ground, causing dirt to fly in all directions. You just marked your own graveyard, Endrick voiced out as he turned the trees in the vicinity to face Gustav's direction. Around 12 trees floated in midair, each over 15 meters in length. Gustav's eyes squinted as his body started transforming. His right hand became like that of the blood wolf, while his left became like that of the bull. One was furry, while the other was just muscular with small, white pointy objects protruding out of it. Gustav grew to over 6 feet in height as his body turned muscular, and his feet became massive with claws on his toes. His face was the only part of his body that remained normal. Endrick stared at his transformation with a look of confusion. What in the world is that? He had missed the moments Gustav displayed his abilities during the embryo test phase, so this was the first time he saw Gustav in this form. However, the moment Gustav dashed out, he threw those thoughts of confusion to the back of his mind and swung his arm out. Swoosh! Fum! Trees were tossed forward as if they were pieces of sticks that weighed nothing. Gustav first dodged about 2 of them, dashing towards the left and right. Dust and sand spread across the place as the trees missed him and slammed into the ground behind him. The next tree that appeared in front of him, Gustav swung his right arm towards it, cleaving it swiftly into 2 halves as he kept running forward. Endrick was in shock as he pulled more trees from the ground, making use of his telekinesis. However, he couldn't keep up with Gustav's speed of destroying and dodging these trees. In a few moments, Gustav arrived in front of the last tree before him, and Endrick grabbed onto its trunk tightly. Gustav was able to stop the tree from moving forward and hold onto it quite easily with both of his hands. He dashed forward towards Endrick and swung out the tree at full force. Swiayu! The body of the tree traveled towards Endrick like a bat being swung out. Unfortunately, this tree was bigger than his entire body. It carried a lot of force as it traveled forward, causing the winds to howl. Endrick raised his left arm up to make use of telekinesis to protect himself from collision, but he seemed to have underestimated the power behind the force of the tree as his telekinesis failed to stop the approaching tree. Bang! The tree slammed into Endrick, swatting him far away like an annoying buzzing mosquito. CKRRKH. The sound of bones cracking reverberated across the place as Endrick's body slammed into several trees ahead, toppling them in the process. Chapter 334. The sound of bones cracking reverberated across the place as Endrick's body slammed into several trees ahead, toppling them in the process. The tree also snapped in half after the collision. However, this didn't hinder Gustav in any way. Gustav threw the remaining part of the tree to the side and dashed forward again. He leaped upwards and threw his leg forward as his body descended towards the falling body of Endrick in midair. Endrick opened his eyes and pushed both palms forward before Gustav could collide with him, sending a telekinetic wall towards him. Gustav used his descending force to spin around and slammed his leg into the telekinetic wall, forcefully ripping Endrick's will apart. How is this possible? Endrick gritted his teeth as he did a flip and landed on the ground with his legs. Due to his earlier attack, Gustav was delayed a bit, so Endrick was able to distance himself further from Gustav. Gustav landed on both legs afterwards and dashed forward again after Endrick. Endrick stretched both his hands sideways and twirled his right finger, causing his body to ascend into the air with speed. Gustav missed him due to that action as Endrick flew over 100 feet into the air in an instant. He turned his body around in midair and faced the ground from his position above. Walls of will. Crush! Endrick voiced out as he stretched out his palm with intensity. Gustav, who was about to jump upwards, suddenly felt a massive force coming from above. Bang! The surroundings were immediately turned into a region of dust as the ground around Gustav caved in. Gustav's hands were currently above his head like he was carrying something heavy. His legs had sunk several centimeters into the ground due to the weight of the invisible force he was currently lifting. Endrick, who was still in the sky, stretched out his left palm also. Before Gustav could try and free himself from the heavy force trying to squash him, he felt another get added to it. Bang! The force he was lifting was suddenly multiplied by 2, causing his legs to sink even more into the ground. Gustav's muscles bulged as his arms trembled from the intense weight. He raised his head and stared at Endrick, who was still floating in midair several hundred feet above him. Gustav's head transformed into that of a serpentine snake as he opened his mouth, causing a purplish beam to gather in front of it before shooting it out. The beam started tearing a hole through the middle of telekinetic walls. Endrick, who noticed this, waved his hands again, causing another telekinetic wall to fall upon the ones Gustav was already lifting. Gustav's legs buckled as he descended a little bit lower due to the enormous increase in pressure. However, in the next second, he raised these invisible walls back up again, causing Endrick's face to lit up with shock. How is he doing that? He should be crushed by now. That's over 15,000 pounds, Endrick thought. He was about to conjure another one when he noticed his trembling fingers. I've used up too much energy. I have to end it now, Endrick said to himself as he descended from the air and landed on the layers of telekinetic walls Gustav was currently lifting. Gustav's eyes squinted as he stared at Endrick intently, while still making use of the purplish beam to create openings through the telekinetic walls. Structural analysis, he voiced out as he placed 2 fingers of his left hand on his forehead and stared at Gustav. Gustav could tell that Endrick was about to use a crazy technique, so he increased the force at which he was firing the purplish beam from his mouth. Endrick suddenly stretched his right palm towards Gustav below. Gustav felt a strange force creeping around his insides, like something was touring his internal structure. The force moved from place to place within his body till it finally settled around his chest area and moved towards his heart. It is over, Endrick voiced out as he opened his eyes. Yes, it is. For you, Gustav responded with a tone of dominance. As Endrick paused for an instant to process Gustav's words, he felt something behind him and turned around. Several blue, glowing orbs could be seen behind him, and the moment he laid his eyes on them, he heard Gustav utter a word from underneath. Detonate, boom. A cloud of blue waves of energy instantly covered the entire vicinity, causing intense destruction. Several trees were blown apart. A small crater was created at the point of impact due to the power of the explosion. Swayaya, the battered body of a young, teenage-looking boy, flew out of the blue waves. Half of his face had been completely charred, with blood oozing out of different parts of his body. Gustav suddenly flew out of the explosion, towards the direction of the boy, with his left arm extended backwards. The instant he arrived in front of him, he threw out his fist. Fwaya, bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as his fist slammed into the face of Endrik, causing him to be catapulted towards the ground. Bang! 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 Endrik's body slammed into the ground repeatedly as it rolled across it, creating another trail of dust and destruction. After a few seconds of rolling across the ground, Endrik's body came to a stop after smashing into a tree. His right eye was the only one opened, and it was only open halfway. All he could see was blurry red, as he felt his head spinning. He could see a silhouette walking casually towards him with a red aura surrounding his figure. I thought I had grown powerful enough to handle anybody. How? These were Endrik's final thoughts before blurg. He coughed out pieces of teeth along with blood and passed out. Gustav slowly transformed back into his normal look as he arrived in front of Endrik and squatted. I warned you and gave you several chances, kid. Am not God, so my mercies are not infinite. I can only tolerate stupidity for so long. Gustav shook his head with a look of pity as he spoke. Chapter 335. First, I will take what belongs to you and make better use of it, Gustav said as he stretched out his fingers towards the unconscious Endrik. As his fingers reached Endrik's neck, as he was about to pierce through, the system suddenly spoke. Someone's coming. Gustav was late to sense it because whoever was coming was still very far away. However, the person entered his range of detection an instant later. Swoosh! A silver streak coming from the south. In the next moment, Angie was right behind him due to her quick speed. What are you doing here, Angie? Gustav voiced out without even turning around or removing his hands from Endrik's neck. He's your brother, isn't he? Angie asked as she moved closer to him. I don't have a brother. I don't have family members, Gustav replied before turning his head to the side. Why have you come here? Leave. Gustav sounded very unaccommodating at the moment, which scared Angie. Don't do it. Don't kill him, Angie said with a light voice as she knelt down behind Gustav. What are you saying? Did you forget what I mentioned about showing mercy to the enemy? Gustav asked. No, of course not. I didn't forget, but he's your own flesh and blood. If you kill him, it will haunt you forever, Angie stated as she placed her hand on Gustav's back. So, what do you expect me to do to someone who was trying to kill me a moment ago? Angie, are you stupid? Gustav suddenly voiced out with a slightly annoyed tone. Angie's head descended lower as she heard that as tears began to well up in her eyes. I can't let him do this. When someone tries to end you, you have to return that gesture in kind regardless of who it may be. Mind you, I will feel nothing after killing someone who tried to kill me, especially not a so-called family member because I don't have a family, Gustav stated and turned around to look forward again. His fingers increased in length and pierced into Endrik's neck, causing flesh blood to drip down. Gustav, don't. Isn't he just a kid? Give him another chance, Angie voiced out from behind. He has used up all his chances. Now is the time of his reckoning, Gustav said as he stared at the notification that appeared in his line of sight. Requirement for bloodline acquisition has been met. Analyzing host compatibility with ambience of will and space, 0/100%. 14/100%. 32/100%. Angie suddenly grabbed Gustav's hand from behind and pulled it from Endrik's neck. Bloodline acquisition has failed. What are you doing? Gustav stared at her as he pulled his arm from her grip. "Don't do it. Spare him this one time," Angie pleaded. "No," Gustav declined instantly. Angie grabbed his hand again and hugged his back to her chest. "I don't want you to do something you'll later regret," Angie said with a pleading tone. "Trust me, I won't regret my actions. This is all for the better," Gustav said as he reached out to grab Endrick's neck again. "Please, Gustav, just this last time. Please spare him for my sake. If he comes to trouble you again, I'll be the one to handle him myself," Angie pleaded. "No," Gustav replied. Tears flowed out of Angie's eyes as Gustav declined. "For my sake as well as yours and the people that I care about or may end up caring about, it's better to end this nuisance at its infancy stage rather than for it to grow and become a bigger threat in the future," Gustav said as his fingers dipped into Endrick's neck again. "Requirement for bloodline acquisition has been met just when the compatibility rate started being calculated. The system suddenly spoke again. Someone's Comey. Before it could finish its statement, bang! A loud sound of collision suddenly reverberated across the place as a cloud of dust spread across the place. "Stop!" A familiar voice drifted into Gustav's and Angie's hearing. As the dust cleared up, 3 people in orange military-like uniform outfits could be seen standing a few feet in front of Gustav, Endrick, and Angie. "Gradiers Anatus," Gustav muttered as he stared at the familiar face in the middle of the 2 officers. "As much as you want to kill him, you cannot," Gradiers Anatus voiced out as he walked forward. He stood right in front of Gustav and looked down at him. "It is forbidden for MBO cadets to engage in death combat without the authorization of your commander. You will get disqualified from the MBO camp if you kill him, and vice versa. That aside, the punishment that also comes afterward is not worth it, really." Gradiers Anatus pulled Gustav's fingers out of Endrick's neck after stating that. "You both are already a part of the MBO, so these rules apply to you," Gradiers Anatus added as he beckoned to one of the officers to take Endrick away. "You are both invaluable assets to the MBO. With the great potential you both have displayed, we cannot afford to lose either of you," Gradiers Anatus stated. Gustav slowly stood to his feet after Endrick had been taken away. He had a look of dissatisfaction on his face, but he didn't say a word. Of course, Endrick's acts here shall not be overlooked. He will be punished duly for his offenses, and the destruction caused in this neighborhood will be taken care of by the MBO, Gradiers Anatus explained. "You called them?" Gustav asked while turning around to stare at Angie. Angie's head hung low. She couldn't stare into Gustav's eyes. Even without answering, Gustav already knew the answer to his question. "Funny how you lots never noticed this neighborhood and never stepped foot in it to even assist them in times of danger. But when someone from the MBO with so-called potential ended up putting themselves in danger around here, you guys suddenly show up," Gustav laughed lightly as he shook his head. The officers' eyes widened as they heard that. "You," one of them pointed out, and wanted to say something, but Gradiers Anatus stared at him with a shut-up look, causing him to keep quiet. "The funniest part is the neighborhood was put in danger by him, and you still came to save him instead of the neighborhood. Hypocrite's toy," Gustav spat out after finishing his statement and began to walk away. Angie stared at his back with an expression of sadness written all over her face. Chapter 336. The funniest part is the neighborhood was put in danger by him, and you still came to save him instead of the neighborhood. Hypocrite's toy, Gustav spat out after finishing his statement and began to walk away. Angie stared at his back with an expression of sadness written all over her face. "Take him back to the tower," Gradiers Anatus commanded. The 2 officers nodded and leaped upwards before disappearing into the darkness of night with Endrick's unconscious body. Angie was still standing in place while Gradiers Anatus moved closer to her and stood on her left, You did what you felt was right. But what you feel is right sometimes might be incorrect. Gradius Anatus voiced out. Gradius Anatus, do you mean? Before Angie could complete her statement, Gradius Anatus interrupted. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it was incorrect to inform us, but I'm also not saying it was the correct decision. Angie was starting to get confused with Gradius Anatus' words, but she still listened attentively. You did this because of him, so let me ask you, if that wasn't his brother, and it happened to be someone else, would you still call us, or would you leave him to do as he pleases? Gradius Anatus asked, Well, I wouldn't interfere if it was someone else, Angie responded. Well then, you shouldn't have, because to him, this boy, Endrick, is just another person to him. He seemed to have cut all ties off from his family. He doesn't even bear their name anymore. Gradius Anatus stated. Angie's eyes widened in realization after hearing that. In this case, you wronged him even though you were trying to do him right, Gradius Anatus added. No, that wasn't my intention. Tears rolled down her eyes as she spoke. How do the both of you happen to be so close? Your personalities are polar opposites, Gradius Anatus wondered out loud as he sighed. One thing you have to understand now, Angie, is that to remain beside someone like him, you have become similar in nature and powerful, or you'll just hold him back. Either way, someone is going to get hurt or end up dead in the future if your personalities continue to contradict each other. It would be fine if you were moving with someone similar to you, since your method of doing things will also be similar, you won't have problems. However, this is someone who shows no mercy to his enemies while you still think twice before making a decision on whether the person deserves to be given another chance or not. You will eventually drag him down. And if ahem, according to what I've seen, Gradius Anatus coughed twice before resuming. According to what I've seen, if he ahem, you and him become something, the possibility of you dragging him back and becoming his weakness is very high. Instead, you should try to be an addition to his strength just like how you did in the Cascia ruins. Gradius Anatus stopped speaking at this point. Silence reigned for a few seconds as Angie reflected on Gradius Anatus' words. Oh, but wouldn't he have been disqualified from MBO camp if I had let him? Angie asked. Oh, that. Well, nothing would have happened. To tell you the truth, the higher-ups want him. So, there's no way he'd be disqualified. They'll just place some kind of restriction on him, or something. Gradius Anatus explained. Then why did you? Angie asked with a confused expression, but Gradius Anatus cut her short before she could complete her question. Yes, those are the rules, but I only mentioned them so he wouldn't get too cocky and start acting how he likes. It's necessary for him to hold back sometimes too, which is why I don't feel like you're completely wrong with your decision, but you did it for the wrong reason, Gradius Anatus stated. Now off you go. I need to inspect this area, Gradius Anatus said while tapping Angie's shoulder. Angie nodded. Thank you for the words of advice, she said with a look of appreciation and started walking forward. Swoosh! Angie sped forward into the direction of the neighborhood. And in a few seconds, she had completely disappeared from Gradius Anatus' line of sight. Gradius Anatus started walking around the place and noted the evidence of battle. Trees toppled and smashed into smaller bits, small craters in different positions, and a wide trail of deep lines parting the ground. This doesn't look like the battle scene of two Zulu-ranked mixed bloods. Most serial-ranked mixed bloods aren't even this powerful. That kid Endrick is only 12 years old, and yet so much potential within them both. But they also happen to be quite problematic. Gradius Anatus sighed while muttering. After checking around for a few more minutes, he made a call. Yes, it's me. How did it go? He was unable to kill the kid. I could only delay them for some time, since the girl made a call. Oh, I see. Quite the bummer. Why do you want the boy gone? I know you can avert trouble for Gustav, but Are you not concerned about him turning into a mindless killer? Dash, he will never turn into a mindless killer. I smack him back to his senses if he does. I want to make sure no one stands in his way on his rise to the top of the organization. He has to be the one to get rid of the threats himself, while I'll assist him from the shadows. I understand, Mississippi. I'll keep giving my support. Dash, you already did a good job by hiding the truth about his multiple abilities and also destroying the evidence that he appeared on the last floors of the tower. I'm grateful. No problem. Young miss, I am quite fond of him myself. I feel it would be better if you were his companion instead of the young girl. Dash, huh? Companion? No, he's too young for me, but if he does manage to become more powerful than I am in the future, and both of us happen to not be taken, I may consider it, if that's what he wants. Young miss, you didn't let me finish. I was just lamenting about the fact that you're not among his peers that are being enlisted into the MBO camp. He seems so similar to you. So I felt the both of you would have made a better team than the young girl he's currently moving with. Dash, oh, you meant team. Okay, what did you think I meant? Young miss. Dash, goodbye. Chapter 337. The call got disconnected at that point, and Great-Ears Anatus was left standing with a confused look on his face. Did she mean what I think she meant? He muttered with a contemplative look, oh well, it's not so much a big deal. Young miss is still quite young after all. Great-Ears Anatus leaped upwards and disappeared into the night sky afterward. Gustav had already arrived back in his apartment a few minutes earlier, although the last floor was in shambles due to the battle earlier, and many neighbors around too had parts of their buildings in a bad state. No one was hurt besides Angie. Angie was already better because she used a healing capsule before going after Gustav. Several officials could be seen in the neighborhood. They were sent by the MBO to make repairs. Those whose apartments were in a very bad state had to stay out and wait for repairs to be done. So even though there were no casualties, Endrick's actions had caused inconveniences for a lot of people, Angie's family included. Gustav's apartment wasn't in a bad state, so he let Angie's family in. When Angie got back, she asked for her family and was informed that they were currently within Gustav's apartment. She gulped down saliva nervously as she hadn't expected that she would still be seeing Gustav this night. Her plan was to think extensively throughout the night, so she would come up with the best way to address the issue that may have caused a dent in their current relationship. Now, she just didn't know how she was going to address him. Angie arrived in front of his door and knocked several times. SSHHH, SSHHH. The door slid open, and Angie saw her brother, Phil, standing on the opposite end. Huh? Where's Gustav? She asked as she walked in. Big brother Gustav said he didn't want to be disturbed. He's in the room doing that thing. What did you call it? Bloodline channeling. Phil answered with a look of uncertainty. Oh, he's meditating. I see. Angie responded as she saw her parents sitting on the sofas in front. Our repairs are not too big, so I'm sure they'll be done in about 2 hours, Angie's father voiced out from up ahead. Angie took a seat and looked around with a nervous expression. How did it go, sis? Did Big Bro Gustav win? What happened to the other one? Phil voiced out in quick succession. If he lost, he wouldn't be here now, would he? Angie voiced out. I knew it. I knew Big Bro Gustav was going to win, Phil stated with an expression of delight. What was the reason for that kid picking a fight? Angie's mother asked with an intrigued expression. Angie decided to explain things to them while omitting the part about Gustav wanting to kill Endrick because of her little brother's presence. Gustav was currently within his bedroom, blocking out all distractions while focusing on recharging his Yarki. He threw what happened a while ago to the back of his mind and peaked his concentration on recharging his Yarki. At the moment, only around 40% of its energy had been recovered, and it was already midnight. Gustav could have made a move earlier because he had managed to start charging his Yarki, but he didn't want to because of the complications that were involved if the Yarki was left to recharge itself without his guidance. A drop of blood rolled down his nostrils, which he quickly cleaned with his sleeves. My injuries would have worsened if I didn't head back immediately, Gustav said internally as his mind focused on the bright pink Yarki. Quite dangerous since regeneration doesn't work as fast internally. Are you mad at her? The system suddenly poised this question out of nowhere. What does that have to do with you? Mind your business, Gustav responded internally. Your business is my business. And I can tell that. Before the system could complete its sentence, Gustav interrupted. Get off my case. I don't want to talk about it, Gustav stated. Gustav continued to recharge his Yarki after that as the system turned quiet. In about 2 hours, Phil came to his room door and announced their departure. Big brother Gustav, our apartment repairs are done, so we're leaving now? Mom and Dad said we should not disturb you, but I just had to say it, Phil voiced out. Also, I think you should speak to big sis Angie. She doesn't seem to be happy, he added before turning around to leave. Gustav, who was still seated on his bed, slowly opened his eyes and stood up from his bed. Angie and her family were about to leave through the door when he walked out of his room towards the living room. Oh, Gustav, thanks for letting us stay here, and sorry for the disturbance. Angie's mother was the first to voice out from the door area after noticing Gustav. It's no problem at all. Gustav waved it off. Her father also said some words of gratitude. Gustav, thanks. Angie looked down as she spoke, avoiding eye contact with Gustav. Gustav nodded as they moved out of his apartment. Angie, we'll see tomorrow, Gustav suddenly voiced out as the door was closing. Angie had a surprised expression on her face as she heard that and looked back to stare at Gustav before the door shut. What are you planning? None of your business. You'll have to wait till tomorrow to find out, Gustav said as he walked back towards his room. Within the MBO tower, Endrik could be seen within a small room where a holographic monitor was placed in front. His white uniform had been stripped off him, and he was currently in a black outfit. He seemed to have just regained consciousness as he was currently checking himself out. Even though his injuries had been taken care of, there were still some scars that hadn't completely disappeared, which was why he had bandages wrapped around his face and neck. On the holographic monitor, a man in uniform could be seen speaking. Your punishment for these offenses are as follows. Chapter 338. On the holographic monitor, a man in uniform could be seen speaking. Your punishment for these offenses are as follows. You will be locked in the isolation room for 2 months. The man on the screen started stating, you will only be fed once every 2 days. You will undergo character evaluation every week. And if no changes have been discovered, an extra 1 week will be added to your isolation time. You will not be joining the others at the start of Year 1 training. As the man kept listing out Endrik's punishments, meanwhile, Endrik was in his thoughts. I don't even remember. Just as he was saying internally, images of his fight with Gustav started popping into his head one after the other. I lost so disgracefully. Endrik gritted his teeth as he thought. And now I have to stay in this place for 2 months. Endrik looked around with an expression of frustration written all over his face. He was partly listening to the man in the holographic monitor, while also looking around the darkroom. The only source of light at the moment was the holographic monitor. There were no tables, chairs, rugs, or any object to be seen around. No, you can't lock me in here, Endrik suddenly shouted out. Your training will be held in this place, and you shall not see the light of day again for the next 2 months. If you're of good behavior, your isolation period will not be extended. The man in the holographic monitor totally ignored Endrik's outrage and kept speaking. Hey, didn't you hear me, old man? Let me out. Endrik screamed out again as he stood up. Hiya! He shouted out as he activated his bloodline and tried using telekinetic waves. Vru, huh? He discovered that he could only send his will out 5 inches away from himself. His abilities had been suppressed. Endrick didn't give up and moved towards one side of the wall before pushing his hand forward. Vru, his telekinesis was like a gust of wind that only grazed the walls softly. Escaping is impossible. Trying to escape will only add more days to your isolation, the man on the screen added. Endrick's face squeezed up as he heard that. He felt like he was going to run mad. It's all his fault. The image of Gustav appeared in his mind as a look of hate hung on his face. I will make sure I have my revenge. Mother, father. Endrick fell to his knees with an annoyed and hopeless look as he said internally, your special class title is at risk of being lost if you fail to show character improvement. The man on the screen kept talking. Endrick had no choice but to bear it and listen with an expression of anguish displayed on his face. Just you wait. Big brother Gustav, even though you're now more powerful than you used to be, I refuse to accept that your strength is higher than mine. You wait. About 8 hours later, it was 10 in the morning, and Gustav had spent the entire night and part of the morning recovering the energy of his Yarki. He was feeling fatigued, but his Yarki was only 80% charged at the moment. Maltita's party would be held in the next 4 hours, which meant he would also have to skip today's daily task since he needed to recharge the Yarki completely before the start of the party. Gustav kept it up and stayed indoors doing the same thing he had been doing for the past one day. It was already getting pretty boring for him, just sitting in one place, but he had to bear it. He had decided that he would never let his Yarki run out of energy anymore, since that was what brought him to this state. Within a luxurious-looking study, a man in a blue business suit sat on a reading chair. A guard in a full black bodysuit was standing in front of him, voicing out some reports. All right. They'll just wait for the kid's answer first. Young Joe voiced out. If he fails to agree to my demands, we move on to his brother. I remember they have a really strong family feud. Young Joe smirked coldly as he took a sip of tea. Also, the father will also find a way to end him once I reveal the information to him. Young Joss' mind went back to 2 days back when he visited Gustav. So, you want me to move over to your side and pretend to still be on Miss Amy's side? Gustav asked. Precisely that. I'll support your rise to the top of the MBO. The information I need at the moment is the location of a precious rock she stole from me. I suddenly lost track of the rock and am unable to locate it anymore, young Joe stated. Not only will I get you to the top, but you also get exclusive first-rate gadgets and armors created by Joe Industries, young Joe added. Gustav had a contemplative look for a few seconds before speaking. You do know that this isn't enough to buy my allegiance. Think about it carefully and join me, young Joe said before standing to his feet and walking forward. He arrived at the right side of Gustav and looked forward before raising his left arm and tapping Gustav's shoulder twice. My father doesn't have to know about what you did to Hung Joe. It can remain between your Miss Amy and us, of course, he voiced out before turning around and walking towards the door. Gustav's eyes squinted. He didn't try to deny it or say anything. It was pointless to argue because he could sense the certainty in his voice. Young Joe walked out and left Gustav to wallow in his thoughts. His little brother is in an awful state at the moment. It's the perfect time to make use of him too, young Joe said with a light burst of laughter. But Sir Young, you said you were only going to implement your plan to use him if Gustav doesn't accept your offer, the massive man in front said with a confused expression. Chapter 339. I changed my mind. It's better to have more than one pawn. I will capitalize on Endrick's hate and use it to my advantage, young Joe voiced out before taking another sip of the tea in front of him. Finally 100%, Gustav weakly fell to his bed as he voiced out. He breathed in and out heavily for a few seconds before deciding to check his current energy. Energy. 2550/6700. It was really tasking for him to direct the flow of energy recovery of his Yarki. He sent his senses into his body again to check on his Yarki. It was glowing a bright pinkish color and swaying like a living flame. Looks like it grew a little bigger than before. The change is barely noticeable, but it's there, Gustav said internally as he observed. That's quite normal. Your Yarki can improve and become more powerful as you make use of it. You just have to be careful with the way you make use of it, so it doesn't end up depleting in energy completely, the system explained. Oh, Gustav had a look of understanding as he heard that. Well, what's the time now? Gustav asked. IT is currently 10 minutes to 2 p.m. The voice of an AI resounded in the room. Oh, damn. It's almost 2. Gustav quickly jumped up and went to the bathroom. He quickly went to brush his teeth, take a bath, and warm one of the foods he cooked 2 nights ago. Even though he was going to a party, he still wanted to eat from home, since he wasn't really interested in outside food. Also, he noticed that in all these high-class parties, they served very little food. He didn't understand if it was a thing of the rich or whatever, but he wasn't having any of their nonsense today. Such stingy people, Gustav said as he gobbled down his warmed-up food with a look of delight. After about 30 minutes had gone by, Gustav was done with his preparations. No fashionista nonsense today. I'll just dress casually, Gustav said as he dusted his long red jacket and walked out of his apartment. Just like Mr. Gon, the Koyan family had also sent a vehicle to pick Gustav up, and they were waiting for him downstairs. Gustav got downstairs and saw the massive mini-jet white light car parked up front. 2 guards were standing in front of the car. They bowed their head in respect as they noticed him, and the door opened up on its own to let him in. As Gustav moved closer to get in, he noticed someone inside. Angie. Gustav voiced out in surprise as he noticed Angie sitting on the right side of the spacious and luxurious-looking vehicle. She was dressed in a red tight-fitted gown, wearing light makeup on her face. She had a shy and nervous look as she stared at Gustav. Gustav moved in, and the door closed up. Matilda also invited you? Gustav asked. Yes, Angie replied as she turned her face away and bit her lips nervously. She knew the car was probably waiting for Gustav all this time, and she had prepared herself to see him, but when he arrived, every word that she thought of disappeared from her mind. Oh, should have known. They're friends now, after all, Gustav said internally as he leaned back and rested. For Hai, the engine of the cars ignited, and they zoomed off into the distance. In about 10 minutes, they arrived in front of a luxurious-looking vicinity. This part of the city wasn't too far from Mr. Gon's place. It was well guarded also, and ville-like houses could be seen all over the place, but these ones were very massive. The vehicle pulled over in front of the largest house in the vicinity. It wasn't as grand-looking like that of Mr. Gon, but it was good-looking also. Painted silver and light yellow, Angie and Gustav walked out of their vehicle, just like the others in the vicinity, who were also getting off from expensive-looking hover cars. During their journey, they didn't speak a word to each other. Most youngsters between the ages of 16 to 20 could be seen, since this was Matilda's party. Gustav and Angie arrived inside after 2 minutes of check-in procedures. They found themselves inside a world they weren't quite used to. Lots of rich youngsters moving around in groups, beautiful and well-structured interiors with glittering stairs on the left side of the large living room. Hey, look, it's Gustav, someone muttered upon seeing Gustav walk in with Angie. He's also with the number 2, Angie. Mutters could be heard coming from all over the place. Angie and Gustav found somewhere to sit. I'll leave here in the next hour, Gustav decided. Young sir, young miss, your seats have been reserved. One of the ushers walked towards them and voiced out. He gestured towards them to follow her, and they did. Their seats were reserved at the front. where Matilda could be seen seating grandly in front, on a large, throne-like seat. The stage was in between them, and some musicians were performing. However, she still noticed Gustav and Angie. The instant she saw Gustav, a smile appeared on her face. He came, she muttered with a look of delight. Angie smiled back at Matilda and waved lightly as they took their seat. Yo make way, weaklings, a familiar voice was heard behind them. Don't you ever shut up, TCH, another familiar voice was heard. Angie looked back to stare at the two that were approaching their table. Rhea, Temmie, she voiced out with a look of bewilderment as she glanced at the two youngsters. Both were dressed in fancy suits, and Rhea stood out due to his spiky orange hair and thug-like attitude. Hey, Angie, Temmie was the first to greet as they approached from behind. Yo, Angie. Huh, who's that? Rhea voiced out as he stared at the back of the person sitting beside her on the table. Gustav didn't turn around to stare at them, so they couldn't see his face. He could already tell who they were without turning around. That stature. My rival. Rhea voiced out as he moved forward hurriedly. Chapter 340. That stature. My rival. Rhea voiced out as he moved forward hurriedly. Temmie also seemed to recognize Gustav's stature from behind and followed after Rhea. Rhea arrived at their sitting position and sat down on the seat opposite Gustav. I knew it was you, Rhea voiced out as he stared at Gustav. Temmie sat on the seat towards Gustav's right side and greeted Gustav calmly. Gustav just nodded slightly back in response and ignored Rhea. You guys just left us back there in the last phase. And you, my rival, don't think I won't catch up soon. Just wait. You'll see, Rhea voiced out with a loud voice as he pointed at Gustav. Your spit is reaching all the way here. When will you learn how to be quiet? Another familiar feminine voice could be heard from behind. Rhea squinted his eyes as he looked ahead. A green-skinned girl, clad in a royal blue gown, with pink gems embedded in different parts, forming flowery patterns, could be seen walking towards them from behind. A small hole was poked in the back of her gown, a little bit beneath the waist area, where her long tail protruded out. Her presence attracted the attention of many guests, just like Rhea and Temmie. Another top 50 worldwide participant. Everyone who flocks around Gustav is powerful. Cowtail. You're here too? Rhea voiced out with a slightly irritated tone. Filthy loud mouth. I didn't think Matilda would invite you also, Glade said, as she arrived before their table. Glade, Angie voiced out as she stood up with a delighted look on her face and jumped into Glade's embrace. Angie. Glade hugged Angie also and rubbed her hair affectionately. I didn't know you were also invited, Angie said as she withdrew herself from Glade. Matilda seems to have invited everyone, Glade said as she took a seat beside Angie. Now that there were 4 seated around this table, only 2 seats were left vacant. Glade greeted Gustav, who reciprocated, and everyone began to converse. This place is going to be pretty noisy soon, Gustav said internally while sighing. This would have been a perfect get-together if a certain loudmouth wasn't around to ruin the occasion, Glade said with delight, and disgust before turning to stare at Rhea afterwards. Hey, shut it, cowtail. You only ranked higher than me in the entrance test, but I promise to catch up soon, Rhea responded. By the way, this table is reserved, so why are there still 2 extra seats here? Temmie asked while staring at the vacant seats. Maybe Matilda invited Falco too, Angie said with a contemplative attitude. Falco wouldn't attend. His family are enemies with the Koyan family, Temmie replied. Who cares about family feud? They are them, and we are ourselves. He's not a man if he doesn't dare to attend the party after being given an invitation, Rhea voiced out as he folded his arms and leaned his back against the chair with a repressed expression. Shut up. Not everyone's a tout like you, Temmie voiced out. He understood very well. just how the big families behave because he came from one himself. Although Rhea was also the son of a well-renowned family in the city, he didn't act like it. He was the type who just liked to do things anyhow without caring about the consequences of his actions. Oh, I see. Maybe that's why he won't be attending, Angie said with an understanding look. But what about the other seat? Timmy asked while still staring at the 2 vacant seats. Maybe. Before Angie could complete her sentence, another person voiced out from behind, "Yo, Gustav." Everyone turned around to stare at who had just arrived. Gustav could already tell who it was from the voice. He was a little surprised as he turned around to look. Approaching their table was a handsome-looking young chap with a bushy afro hairstyle and smooth melanin skin tone. His smile made him look quite confident and approachable. Gustav exclaimed. "Who's this?" Rhea and Timmy wondered as they stared at EB. They hadn't come into contact with him before since they didn't meet up with Gustav and the rest during the final test phase. "Hey man, how you doing?" He reached out to give Gustav a handshake as he arrived before them. Gustav shifted his chair backwards and turned around to return the handshake. The guests were surprised to see Gustav greet someone in such a friendly manner. He didn't even get up when Rhea and Timmy arrived. Rhea and Timmy happened to come from influential families, yet he acted nonchalantly with them while the unknown person who has just arrived was welcomed more warmly. This made them wonder just who he was. Did he say EB? Isn't that the participants with the highest amount of gathered grandstones? He was also among the ones who didn't attend the display of the final results, just like Gustav. Wasn't he from Malta City? What is he doing here? Well, he's not the only one from another city attending this gathering. If you know what I mean, some of the youngsters who also passed the final phase remembered EE's name from the display. Gustav was the participant with the highest number of points, but EE managed to gather more stones than any other participant. EE took a seat afterwards on Gustav's left, which was one of the vacant seats. "You traveled from halfway across the world to be here," Gustav stated as they sat. "Yeah, Matilda invited me. And I was like, this would be a great time to visit your city before we leave for camp to train for years in isolation. So why not?" EE replied with a smile. Rhea and Timmy stared at EB, scrutinizing him. Rhea was especially focused on checking EE out to see what was so special about him that it made Gustav give him more attention than others. "Calm down, fellas. If eyes could unclothe a person, I'd be naked by now," EE voiced out with a burst of light laughter as he turned to stare at Rhea and Timmy. Chapter 341. Everyone started laughing after hearing that, and Glade decided to throw in a little something extra too. "Wait till he starts opening his mouth. You'll be assaulted by flying white bullets." "Ha, that's his bloodline ability, right?" EE asked cluelessly, but from the weird stares and laughter of everyone besides Rhea, he figured out what she meant. Rhea and Glade started arguing once again, while Gustav discussed with Evie. They started catching up on some things that had happened recently. The place remained lively as different performances were done in the middle of the large living room. Matilda had sneakily waved to them several times from her sitting position. She was dressed like a princess today. She would have gone to meet them, but she had to stay up there and look pretty as many people came up one after the other to offer their congratulations. On one of the 3 tables to the right of Gustav was another group of people in luxurious outfits. They seemed to be a family due to the presence of 2 elderly men among the group of 5. A particular green-haired kid in there. Mitz stared at Gustav's table and nodded. "Now that I'm seeing him in person, he just might be strong enough to contend with me," he voiced out. "Haha, Dietrich, are you kidding? There's no way that clown can match your strength." The other kid beside him with green and white-colored hair voiced out, "He's no clown Carter. I can see." Before Dietrich could complete his statement, one of the middle-aged men in there midst interrupted. You still held back during the test phase. If you didn't, you'd be a special class candidate by now, he said with a dissatisfied expression. If I didn't, I'd be interrogated and examined just like he's going to be when he enters the MBO camp, Dietrich said as he stared at the man. Would you like for that to happen, Uncle Garrett? He asked. Humph, of course not. We don't want to draw their attention and find out. It's better he's drawing all the attention to himself, the one called Uncle Garrett responded. They all looked a bit similar to one another, which was enough to figure out that they were under the banner of one family. Let's just seal the deal with the princess of the Kuo-yin family today. I hope you're ready, Dietrich. We came all the way from our city just for this, the other elder with large, circular eyes voiced out. Ooh, yes, Dietrich answered while turning back to stare at Matilda, who was currently smiling while staring in the direction of Gustav's and Angie's table. Matilda's family had seats positioned right behind her. Several elders with haughty expressions could be seen among the other youngsters in the Kuo-yin family. They all had white hair or partly white hair like Matilda. Once again, Gustav was unable to leave after an hour had gone by. EE's appearance, along with the rest, made him change his mind. He hadn't expected to meet them here today, so he decided to still spend some more time here. After another hour went by, the youngsters were called to the middle of the living room to dance. Lots of the youngsters went over to Matilda to request her hand to dance, but she gave them one excuse or the other. Someone from her family came over to her to whisper something in her ear. When Dietrich from the Odeli family comes to ask you to dance, accept. This is the order from the elders. The young lady moved back to her sitting position after voicing this in Matilda's ear. Maltita's bright expression darkened a little. She forced a smile as she sneakily stared in the left direction, where a green-haired kid could be seen sitting in the midst of a group of 5. Come on, go now and ask for her hand. She doesn't dare say no, Dietrich's uncle urged while whispering in his ear. Dietrich noticed Matilda's brief gaze and stood up just as his uncle instructed and started moving forward. Matilda's right finger trembled slightly as she gulped down saliva. She suddenly stood up and started walking forward. Oh, looks like she's quite sensible going to meet up with him, the uncle muttered as they stared at Matilda walking forward. To their surprise, Maltita suddenly turned to the right, distancing herself from Dietrich's reach, and arrived in front of Gustav's table. Please dance with me, she voiced out the instant she arrived in front of their table, while stretching her hand towards Gustav. The guests and youngsters on the dance floor had astonished looks on their faces. Matilda was said to be very snobbish, so they didn't expect that she would ask Gustav to dance despite his status. The Kuo-yin family behind all had looks of confusion. What is she doing? Did you give her the wrong message? One of the elders asked the lady who went to whisper to her ear the other time. No, I told her the decision of the elders, the lady answered with a look of confusion also. Angie, Glade, and the rest of them on the table were surprised at the sudden request, so they stared at Gustav, waiting for his response. I didn't bargain for this, Gustav said internally. He didn't want to accept because he'd just draw more attention to himself, so he was hesitant. Matilda still had a smile on her face, but within her she was begging and hoping that Gustav would agree. From the corner of her eyes, she could still see Dietrich approaching her current position. Please say yes, Gustav. Maltita was hoping internally, but Gustav was yet to respond. He raised his head up and stared at her eyes. Just what is she playing at? She should know that I wouldn't like this kind of stuff, Gustav said internally, not knowing that Matilda couldn't voice out her true intentions. Just as he was about to respond, Dietrich arrived before their table and stretched out his hand to Matilda. I humbly request for your hand in a dance, Dietrich voiced out. Matilda turned to stare at him, then at Gustav. I'm sorry, but I already asked for Gustav's hand, Matilda replied. He doesn't seem interested. Take my hand instead, Dietrich said with a charming smile hung on his face. Gustav stared at Matilda's expression. It was only for a moment, but he noticed that displeasure and slight trembling as her outstretched hand slowly descended. "I accept," Gustav said as he reached out his hand and grabbed that of Matilda's before it dropped completely. Hope flashed in Matilda's eyes as she turned back to stare at Gustav with an even broader smile. Chapter 342. "I accept," Gustav said as he reached out his hand and grabbed that of Matilda's before it dropped completely. Hope flashed in Matilda's eyes as she turned back to stare at Gustav with an even broader smile. Gustav stood to his feet and moved forward while still holding onto Matilda's hand. The members of the Koyun and Odeli family that were present had conflicted expressions on their faces as they watched Gustav and Matilda walk towards the dance floor hand in hand. Gustav didn't even spare Dietrich a glance as he walked past him with an unbothered expression. Even the other youngsters from prestigious families had heard of the Odeli family, but knowing Matilda's attitude, they wouldn't be surprised if she declined him despite their family's powerful status. They had no idea that in this situation Matilda didn't really have a choice. She would have accepted if Gustav had refused her hand. Dietrich stared at Gustav's and Matilda's back as they approached the dance floor with a wry smile on his face. "I don't think that was not intentional," he said internally as he started moving towards his seating area. Some girls around walked up to him to ask for a dance, but he declined them all. The Odeli family was known for being a very large family in the Far East for cities away. They were even larger than 3 large families combined because they had businesses in about 10 different cities. Dietrich is among their youngest heirs, who is said to be the strongest in his generational line. He also took part in the MBO test entrance and performed wonderfully, being among the top 5 worldwide. Although Gustav was currently more popular than any of them, Dietrich had been well known for a long time. Gustav and Matilda's bodies hugged each other as they swayed beautifully from place to place across the dance floor. Matilda leaned her chin on Gustav's left shoulder area as they danced. What's wrong with her?" Gustav could feel her hurried breath on his neck. It was like she was scared of something, which had Gustav wondering. "Matilda, what's happening?" Gustav whispered the question into her ears. I can't explain everything here, but I promise to tell you everything when I get the chance. Please, for now, bear with my actions," Matilda pleaded. Gustav could feel the trembling in her voice as she pleaded. All right, just don't go overboard," Gustav replied. He could tell it had something to do with the presence of the youngster that asked for her hand. "By the way, who is that guy?" Gustav asked as they kept dancing. "His name is Dietrich. He is from the Odeli family, one of the most prestigious families in the Deep East," Matilda explained. "Obviously, he is." "The haughty look, I'm familiar with that," Gustav said. Back in the seating area of the Odelis, Dietrich's uncle was voicing out harshly. "She decided to pick that kid over you, just because of momentary fame. Tisich, the Koyun family, lacks foresight," the uncle voiced out. "It's fine, Uncle. She was already headed for him before I arrived. I heard that she even got to be a special class because of him. So Gustav is nothing to scoff at," Dietrich stated. Because they're both special class candidates. Now, the Koyun family looks down on us," the other kid voiced out. Gustav and Matilda continued to dance together for about 30 minutes until they finally decided to separate because Matilda had already come up with a plan to deal with her current predicament. She once again begged Gustav to follow up with whatever actions she performed later on. Gustav didn't like being kept in the dark, but he understood that whatever was happening was something she would spend a lot of time explaining, so he decided not to bother her about it right now until they were together alone. Matilda returned to her sitting position with a slightly tired look on her face. Anyone that asked her for a dance at this point was turned down with the excuse that she was tired. Dietrich noticed this and figured out that this would be the same outcome if he went over to ask her for a dance again, so he decided against it. After about an hour, the party was finally coming to an end. This was when families started coming forward to present gifts and ask for Matilda's hand for their sons, who were around the same age as Matilda. Gustav was really surprised to see such things happening. Is this how big families act? He didn't expect these people to be shameless enough to parade their heirs and sing the praises of their descendants as they requested Matilda to be betrothed to them. Our very own beloved son, Fresses, placed top 100 in the world ranking. I'm sure he's worthy enough. Not only is our family influential in the transport business, but our very own son is also placed among the top 100. I hope the Koyan family sees him as worthy enough. They came out one after the other, dropping gifts in front of Matilda. At the moment, a middle-aged man with white and gray hair was standing on the left side of Matilda, while another man, who looked no older than 30 years with very similar facial features to Matilda, stood on her left. Thank you, we will wait for Matilda to consider and make a choice herself. The man on the left answered them one after the other with the same statement. She doesn't even know them. Why would she accept? Could this be why she acted like that earlier? Gustav started to put two and two together. This was practically no longer a party. It had practically turned into a betrothal ceremony, since Matilda had no choice but to pick someone at the end of the day. What is this? The ancient times? Gustav had a repressed look as he watched the display. I didn't know that this was even a thing, he voiced out. Gustav, and Angie were the only ones with confused looks here. Glade, Rhea, and Timmy didn't look surprised as they watched the display. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.